So I'd like to call the Planning Commission meeting of September 24th, 2015 to order. Let the record show all commissioners are here. At this time, I'd like for you to join with me in a salute to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much. Are there any agenda changes?
No.
No agenda changes. Okay, we're going to move on to the public comment period. If there's someone in the audience that would like to address the commission on an item that's not on our agenda today, now would be your time.
Joe Kelly, just to let you folks know, in case of the unrepresented area of District 1, and there's a Senate and a Assembly district that I'm not represented in either. Last Tuesday, the Board of Supervisors on a 2-2 vote upheld your motion to deny the appeal. So what I'm asking is because it's going to come up again in the next item, is a mitigated negative declaration, is that a county asset, considering that it does contain a dollar value to it? Does it come under the concept of property, which could be intellectual property, could be any kind of writings, anything else? I'm trying to find out an answer to this question. So I will be asking it in the next agenda item. So if any of you have any, you don't have to respond to me now, but if any of you have any ideas on it, I would appreciate if you would respond then under an agenda item. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? And if you could please silence your phones. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. You might want to take that call out in the hall. Thank you. The next item is the approval of the minutes from the August 13, 2015 Planning Commission meeting. Are there any revisions, corrections?
None from me.
Is there a motion to adopt the minutes?
I'll move to adopt the minutes of the August 13th meeting.
Second. It's been moved and seconded. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries 5-0. The next item is our public hearing, which is 2014-058, tentative subdivision tract map for Western Asset Recovery, Inc. And I'm going to turn it over to Darcy for a staff presentation.
Good morning. Before you today is a tentative subdivision tract map for Western Asset Recovery, Inc. They're proposing to divide 120 acres into 2 residential agricultural lots and 1 remainder lot. The land use designation is agricultural preserve. The zoning is A1, general agriculture. In terms of utilities to the site, ultimately it would be individual wells and on-site septic. Just a general location map. The property is located on South Gulch Road, which comes off of Milton Road in Milton. In terms of the environmental setting of the property, it's vacant of any trees. It is not located within the 100-year flood zone. The site is currently vacant as well of any other structures. It is not located in any designated critical habitat. It does have a medium archaeological sensitivity. There was a cultural resource study that was done which included these parcels amongst other parcels from a previous map, which I'll talk about in a little bit. So some background, this parcel, which actually has 2 parcel numbers, the only reason it has 2 parcel numbers is because it is divided by a tax rate area. So there is a condition of approval on the map that will require them to submit an application through LAFCO and annex into 1 tax rate zone. And then what will ultimately happen is it will have 1 parcel number as opposed to 2. So this was part of a previous map known as Liberty Estates. It was known as Parcel 5 in that map. That final map was recorded. Part of that map required a bunch of improvements to be done to South Gulch Road. It required improvements at the intersection of South Gulch and Milton. All of those improvements have been done, and they are consistent with the county standards, so no additional improvements are required as part of this map. So you might also be wondering, it's only 2 parcels and a remainder, why is it not a parcel map versus a tentative subdivision map? So what the MAP Act says is because this is part of a previous subdivision, they are required to do a tentative subdivision map and not a parcel map. So they're held to the standards of that TST.
Could I interrupt you to describe what a tentative map is? Pardon me, what a tentative, why tentative? What's the implication of that?
So the tentative subdivision map is typically for 5 parcels or more. A tentative parcel map would be for 4 or fewer.
I think the question is the tentative part.
Yeah.
When an application is submitted for a subdivision, it's called a tentative map, tentative subdivision map or tentative parcel map. That it means it goes through the process, we act on it, approve with conditions or deny. That tentative map then is good for a period of time until they can satisfy those conditions and record the final map. So it's tentative until they satisfy the conditions and actually survey the land and record it. Then it becomes a subdivision that you can sell lots.
Oh, this tentative is just the status until they until they actually mark it off?
And they satisfy all the requirements as far as providing water and sewer and road improvements, whatever
All
else
right.
is necessary.
Got it, thank you.
Thank you, Peter. In 2014, a lot line adjustment was done for this parcel and an adjacent parcel, resulting in the 120-acre parcel that it is currently today. That has been recorded. The new assessor's parcel maps are out and available now. And originally when this application was submitted, it was listed under parcels 11 and 12. Now that that has been recorded and all the maps have finally been updated, it is now parcels 12 and 13. So typically when you make a change, like a record of survey or lot line adjustment, parcel numbers change. So I wanted to reflect that because your staff report does say 11 and 12, and it's now 12 and 13. As I said, existing improvements that were done meet county standards, so nothing additional is required. The previous map, as part of mitigation measures, had a 100-foot setback for non-buildable and non-disturbed area recorded on that map, as well as the 120-foot wide transition easement. Those setbacks and the transition easement are also mitigation measures that are now on this map. So although they're already there and recorded, this is just that extra step to ensure that on this new map, when they satisfy their conditions and it's recorded, those setback areas will also be included on that new map.
And when were those setbacks established? Not the transmission, because that would have been there for some time, but the other setback, the non-buildable, non-disturbed?
That was done on the previous project for Liberty Estates, what this parcel was part of.
In the year?
Let's see, we did that one in 2000 and, it was originally 2007. I think we did that one in 2012, I believe. Yeah,
2012?
I believe so.
Okay.
I can tell you in just a second.
We're going to revisit that. Okay, go ahead.
Okay. So what I wanted to show you on this map, just as a clarification, is that the top one here, the original parcel 5 for Liberty Estates, this is what it looked like. When the lot line adjustment came through, this is where you'll see what the new adjustment is. So originally it was 108 acre parcel, now it's 120 acre parcel. So this lot line adjustment, you can see there was an adjustment between the two. So this is the new assessor's parcel map for that. So I just wanted to show you that so you can see the progression that was done. In terms of this particular map itself, it is consistent with the general plan and Title 17. The 2 parcels that they are creating are 40.02 acres. The remainder parcel is 40.37 acres. This tentative subdivision map is not subject to the resolution, which discusses you can't create more than 1 additional parcel unless you have public water or sewer. And that is because these parcels are 40 acres or larger in size, so there was an exemption in that resolution for that. Section 1716.070 of the zoning code does regulate in terms of lot width, size, setbacks, lot coverage. So such things as lot coverage and setbacks, those will all be verified at such time that somebody comes in to actually put something on that parcel, a home or another agricultural building. So on the screen before you right now is the actual tentative subdivision map. So what they're doing is we have parcel 1, parcel 2, and the remainder parcels. Parcels 1 and 2 will have access off of South Gulch Road. Ultimately, they'll come in for an encroachment permit for a driveway. The remainder parcel, there's already been a recorded easement dedicated for this parcel to transverse over the adjacent parcel to get to here. And that, like I said, has already been recorded, so that easement currently exists for access. In these areas here, it's kind of hard to see on the smaller map, I apologize. Here and here are those existing 100-foot non-disturbed, non-buildable setback areas for mitigation of that seasonal drainage. This is the existing 120-foot transmission line, which is also already recorded on these parcels, but carried over as a mitigation for this one, so we can ensure that those are put on these new parcels. In terms of CEQA, nothing has changed in terms of the site conditions, but we did do a new environmental document for this particular project. We did not tier off of the other one. It's a brand new project. It was circulated for a 20-day circulation period. The mitigation measures that were placed upon it were ones from the previous project. There were no comment letters received during that circulation period. Staff has not received any comments on the project itself other than those from county departments and agencies. So the recommendation is that the Planning Commission, after consideration, pass a resolution adopting the initial study and mitigated negative declaration and approving the tentative subdivision tract map. And I can answer any questions you might have. The owner applicant is also here as well.
Thank you, Darcy. Do the commissioners have additional questions for Darcy now?
Yeah, I have a question about the environmental mitigation measure carried over from the previous map. My understanding from the packet is that this had to do with, well, it's a little bit strange. It looks like there was a CEQA evaluation analysis that has to take into consideration California salamander, right? And it was determined that the habitat was not a salamander habitat, and that there has been no salamanders found on the site. But nevertheless, this mitigation measure was imposed. So I want to know how that came about. My understanding is that the applicant said, "Yeah, I'm just going to go ahead and do this." Have I got that about right? Or I just don't understand how it came about that it was required when there was no environmental need for it.
Well, because it is a seasonal drainage, it does potentially have the ability at some point in time to have either habitat for a certain species, or it could potentially have habitat for new species. So the previous project that was done determined that these seasonal drainage had that even slightest potential, so therefore the biologists had recommended that these be set aside as a non-disturbed and non-buildable area.
Okay, I didn't read where a biologist made that recommendation. I read, maybe I didn't read carefully enough, but that I read that it was found that it was not a suitable habitat. Do I need to find that section in the report?
Well, it would have been in the biological assessment, which I am just realizing, and I apologize, is not part of your packet.
Well,
but typically what happens is the biologists will go out and they'll search. So this site in general had the possibility of having 9 potential species on site. They ruled out 2 of those species from the get-go. So ultimately, after doing a thorough site visit, although he determined that it wasn't suitable for tiger salamander,
that it was not.
Right, there potentially could be that slightest impact to another species based upon the seasonal drainage and the water that.
Another
flows.
species that has
would-
some kind of protective status?
Correct.
What species was
So
that?
it could be a vernal pool species, it could be, let me flip through the initial study.
That's it.
So if you look at page 16 of the initial
On
study.
there. That's
So that-
that's my
top-
note
Yeah,
page.
so the top paragraph states that it's a low and a very low suitability at best for CTS, and a low level of suitability for other special status species. So those special status species,
So the answer to my question is, in spite of that second sentence, however, the applicant chose to provide this 100-foot setback.
correct, for the reasoning of that there still is a low level of suitability in those drainage areas.
Okay, what I'm trying to get at is, was the applicant required to do it, or was the applicant chose to do it? It looks like the applicant
He
chose.
chose to do it.
Okay, so he was not required to do it.
It was part of the biological assessment. It was a recommendation, and the applicant chose to do it.
Okay,
So therefore, it was a mitigation placed upon the project.
okay, and that's the second part of my question, is that if the applicant chose to do it, he didn't have to do it, okay? Right? We agree?
Well, most likely what staff would have done as well is that because the biological assessment states that there still is a low level of suitability for some sort of habitat, we would have probably imposed that mitigation measure anyways, or we would have sent it off for a consultation with U.S. Fish and Wildlife and Fish and Game to ensure that they also concurred of whether or not this was suitable habitat.
Okay, so just to preclude that action, the applicant said, yeah, I'll just go ahead and do it?
Correct.
At what level of suitability do we make that kind of determination to impose or send it off to environmental or what? I mean, at what point do you make that decision?
If it came back that there was absolutely zero level of suitability, the projects are still routed to U.S. Fish and Wildlife and Fish and Game for review, and they can review them. In this case, it still had even the slightest threshold of having that suitability, and in that case, there still could potentially be an impact. So even though the conditions at the time stated it didn't appear that there was anything, during a wet season, you could have the species there and you could have the habitat.
Okay. All right.
The option would be is if the applicant did not agree with that mitigation measure, they could have opposed it at the time that we did the previous study. The applicant could have also submitted an updated biological study through this process. And if the circumstances were changed, we could have, through this process, made that determination that it was no longer suitable to have that setback area there.
Okay. This is my main question about this particular issue. I'd like to hear from the applicant about the history on that, and as a cross-check, if you don't mind.
Sure.
Chair?
We're going to be getting right to that. So
Okay.
are there any other questions of the commission from Darcy?
Real quickly, just let me look at my tabs. I guess not.
Okay, well, you'll have another chance later on. So at this point, could I ask the applicant or the applicant's agent to please come up and...
Good morning.
Good
My name
morning.
is George Rose, and I'm the applicant. before George Rose, this is owned in my pension plan. And I've worked with staff closely for the last several years on this. I think the map, the previous map was recorded in 13. And at that time, we hired a...
Mr. Rose, could you speak up just a little
Sure.
bit?
I'm
Thank
sorry.
you. Thank you.
I'm going to try to address your question, Mr. Tuno. We hired a PhD by the name of Walter Turdoff. He was a biologist, and his comment was, I'm just going to read this if it's all right. His comment was, the observation of bullfrogs along the stream between the permanent and temporary ponds would prevent the tiger salamander from using or breeding in this area.
The bullfrogs prevent the salamander?
Yeah, because they eat them.
They eat them?
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, and that was his conclusion. And he went out there, and I know this, he was a very thorough guy, as the staff has been thorough, as you can see. But he went out there and for like a period of a month, off and on, looking for vernal pools and everything that he could.
Wet season?
Wet season, yes. 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 In fact, he wouldn't complete his report until after.
He's out there with a flashlight looking for bullfrogs and whatnot?
I don't know about that.
Well, I mean, isn't that where you see them?
That's where that's
Nevertheless,
where you see
it
him.
is
Yeah,
true.
but I don't know. I
Okay.
can't verify that. But that's all. We're trying to get this done so we can furb my estate.
I understand.
And
So, Mr. Rose, are you saying you're not in agreement with this mitigation?
I'm in agreement with it.
Okay,
Yeah, I'm
that's
in
what I was
agreement
just
with it.
wondering.
I've
Okay.
worked with Darcy for several years. She's been very helpful.
Great.
Most of all, returned all her phone calls, which I appreciate. So it's been a difficult experience, but she made it as easy as possible.
Thank you.
So
Okay.
anyway, we're just here asking for your approval.
Great, thank you very much.
And I'm not just questioning for the purpose of this application, but for future applications. I want to know what the process is and what the standards are here. And I just want to make sure that it looks like it looks like the applicant's being very generous here in agreeing to a setback that he might not have had to agree to. And I wanted to know the process under which, you felt you had to agree to it.
It was an easy decision to make, Mr. Tuno, because that area is steep. There's no need for anyone to be down there. There's nothing to be built down there. It's steep. It goes into like, not a big ravine, but a little ravine. And there's no need for anybody to be down there, and it's part of the beauty of the property. Part of the beauty of the property.
Yeah, I think there are other values to a drainage area, a stream course, than just the endangered species. There's, erosion issues. There are, just non-endangered wildlife that utilize those corridors. So there's value to those, and when there's, plenty of room, more ideal building sites outside of that, then having that kind of setback is a fairly routine type of mitigation that's applied to look at all biological resources, not just those that are endangered.
I understand that, and I appreciate what Mr. Rosen has done with this. I just want to make sure that in the future, we're not applying standards that are unreasonable to future, property owners. And it's, in my opinion, if he wants to put that 100-foot setback in there, that's his business. But if it was really a voluntary act on his part, then it shouldn't be part of the resolution. It should be, if he wants to do it, fine, but he doesn't have to. Now, if we're saying, if he hadn't agreed to it, we probably would have kicked this thing to another level of environmental study, and then he would have said, okay, brother, okay, fine, I'll just do it. That's the dynamic I'm trying to get at here. I don't think that was the case.
No,
I think
that
he would have
wasn't
said,
the case.
it's no difference to me. You got a steep ravine, you're not going to do anything with it anyway.
Actually, we just did it so in the event one of my grandkids, after I go, they would have the same restriction.
I understand that.
Yeah,
But
and I'm okay
and
with
that's another factor, is that the restriction applies to everybody that owns that property from now until forever.
Unless they want to hire biologists to go in and prove otherwise, I guess. I don't know how it would work, but And I think if you just could see it, it's just one little area of the property where it goes down into a little ravine.
It's not my property.
I know
really
your
don't
point.
care.
I get your point, and it's a good
But
one.
I'm just trying to, I understand, and the system, and I just want to make sure that we don't have a system that's overly burdensome or that's arbitrary. And I wanted to make sure that this was something that was truly voluntary on your part, and that you didn't feel like if you didn't do it, you were going to be up against some other expenses and delays and that sort of thing.
I think Mr. Rose has answered that question several times.
It's been
I don't think it was several times, but
Yeah, I believe so.
I'm okay with it,
Yeah.
but thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rose.
Okay.
Is there anyone else in the audience would like to speak regarding this project?
Joe Kelly, I have no problem with this project. I just have, from hearing the interaction going on here, a statement was made about bullfrogs. At the state level, bullfrogs are a non-native species. In my particular case, they have required people, my neighbors that have a problem, to drain their ponds so that the bullfrogs are dead, so the native frogs will come back. On the 100-foot setback that Mr. Tuno was talking about, could that be construed to be also a sanitary setback, since it is a potential of not necessarily a wetlands, but a watershed area? So with the applicant, I agree with him. That's the smartest thing he can do. What is the purpose of a mitigated negative declaration if you have CEQA review or not CEQA review? And was this mitigated negative declaration part of a CEQA review? That's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yeah, we'll get
Colleen Platt, excuse me, I've had a cold. Good morning, with MyValleySprings.com and the Calaveras Planning Coalition. Just a couple comments. I do want to thank the applicant, George Rose, very much for being willing to, for appreciating the beauty of the property and being willing to protect that and pass that on to his grandkids. The streamside setbacks are, like I believe Peter Maurer said, they were a fairly routine thing to do, streamside setbacks. That's not unusual. Nobody would really want to build in an area that might potentially flood anyway down there, and there's habitat. And I do believe Darcy also said that if there was even a slight possibility of being any habitat for anything listed down there, that there could be a consultation with Fish and Wildlife. Well, nobody wants to do that. I mean, that would set up all kinds of time and delays and problems. So for something that, seems to be a no-brainer anyway, why would you want to go there? So just a comment on that. The other thing I did want to mention, Darcy alluded to this earlier, when this project was approved back in 2013, August 2013. As she mentioned, parcel 5 was originally a smaller parcel. I'm not sure what exactly the acreage was, but it wasn't 120 acres. It was a smaller parcel. So in between that time, August 2013 and now 2 years ago, there was a lot line adjustment done, and the boundaries were moved, and the parcel was enlarged, basically. And it was enlarged to be just over 120 acres, which is the which is necessary to be able to subdivide it further. So when this subdivision was originally done, this parcel was left at a certain size, and then it was increased in order to be subdivided further. So I'm a little, this was legally done. The lot line adjustment was done. It's completed. I'm not questioning that. It's just I'm not sure if this is an appropriate thing to be doing, and if this happens on a regular basis, if we have a subdivision map that's approved for certain parcel sizes, and then later that parcel is adjusted and made larger so that it can be further subdivided. I'm not sure if this is appropriate. So, and I've seen lot line adjustments done on other agricultural parcels, and I'm not sure if this is the reason, and perhaps the county could address that, planning department. Thank you.
Thank you, Colleen. Anyone else? All right, I'm going to close the public hearing, but perhaps we could address some of the questions that were asked.
Sure. The first question was Mr. Kelly's query about how a mitigated negative declaration falls into the CEQA process. And any discretionary project is subject to CEQA. We have to do an environmental analysis, and the options that the county has is to find that it's exempt, the number of listed exemptions. If we can find that there are no significant impacts or those impacts can be mitigated, then we prepare a negative declaration or a mitigated negative declaration. So the MND, mitigated negative declaration, is the document that says, here we've analyzed all the impacts and we found that there is no significant impact because we've imposed these measures on the project. The other alternative, obviously, is the EIR, where there are significant impacts. They can't be mitigated. We have to do a more thorough analysis. So in a nutshell, CEQA 101A is, that's how it works. And then Colleen Platt's question about the lot line adjustments. There's any number of reasons someone might adjust the boundaries of their property. There could be, they just, we want to negotiate with the their neighbor to acquire a little bit of their land so that they have a better view. Maybe there's a setback issue, or they could want to subdivide. In the case of where this situation, well, in any case, the resulting parcels from a lot line adjustment must meet the zoning requirements, the minimum size requirements. So if you've got a 30-acre parcel and a 50-acre parcel, and the zoning is 20-acre minimum, you could adjust that so you end up having 2 40 acres so that someone could subdivide it. The resulting is that the density is still met, and which is what happened in this case, that they acquired the land to enable them to further subdivide. And there's nothing wrong with that. When they come in for the subsequent subdivision, which they have, we analyze that project. And we have a mitigated negative declaration, or recommending approval. It meets our standards. It meets the minimum parcel size. So, and we review the lot line adjustments as well when they come through. They're handled by the county surveyor's office, but they're routed to planning department to ensure that they do meet our zoning requirements. So, that answer any questions as far as lot line adjustments?
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions of commissioners regarding this project? So, all right, I think we're ready for the recommendation.
Staff recommends the Planning Commission pass a motion authorizing the chair to sign Resolution 2015-022, adopting the mitigated negative declaration and approving TSTM 2014-058 based upon the findings and conditions contained therein.
Is there a motion?
So moved. Second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries 5-0. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, next we are going to be reviewing the revised technical background report. So, Peter, is there some presentation, or we just dig in?
I'll make a brief presentation.
Okay.
So the background report is essentially a compilation of a variety of different documents that have been used. Some of the documents that have been used for the preparation of the general plan. There are other documents that have also been relied upon. There are future documents that we will use, specifically the EIR, which will provide additional information as we move forward in the process. I'm now calling it the technical background report, or recommended we call it a technical background report, just to further clarify. Some of the comments that we've received was that, well, there's a lot of other information that's not included in here. Well, we could have a background document that's this thick if we included every piece of information that we have used through this whole process. This compilation of information is based on those requirements where we're supposed to review certain things pursuant to state law, flood maps and some of the different kinds of data that was looked at. It's not sort of readily available someplace else. So there were background reports prepared early on in the process that are still available and still part of the public record that I have not included in this, and is they're certainly available. They're online. They're available in hard copy at our office. And I know that they're also out on other websites, so that information is still there. It doesn't mean it was ignored. It was utilized to date, and there will be more. So there's nothing of a policy nature in this document. It's just simply, here is sort of a package of information that we utilize that otherwise we sort of have to pull from a lot of different sources, and made it perhaps a little bit more user-friendly and available for the public as well as the decision makers in processing the general plan. There were some criticisms, legitimate criticisms of the background report that we released back in December. It was something we literally threw together at the last minute. We were trying to get everything out, and those are take responsibility for that. So we've tried to make it more user-friendly by adding table of contents. There were some statements about, what's the purpose of this information? So we've added some discussion in some cases where it didn't have, why is this information here? We did just receive, Amy Augustine, our consultant, has been working with Judith Marvin to update the cultural resources information. And I just got that yesterday. I sent it out last night to you. I provide hard copies for you. There's also a couple sets of that on the podium here. And I would recommend that section also be included in the edits that we've made. Other than that, I can answer any questions you might have regarding this. And we've all been a little distracted over the last couple of weeks, so it's like I'm going to sort of refocus my energy on this. So it may take me a moment to respond to questions that you have, but we're happy to.
So how do you guys want to go through it page by page? What would be your pleasure on this?
I think we should just, my suggestion, if somebody has a specific note on an item, take that note, because
But
it's
maybe
not
start at the
policy,
beginning.
and just kind of.
Well, maybe we could use the natural divisions in the report as a place to stop and start. Otherwise, that's how many pages I've got notes on, and we don't want to sit here and listen to
I have a
me.
few too.
Yeah, so I think maybe
Just
take
kind of like,
take
let's
a chunk and
just start at the beginning and just kind of like weave through until we get to a tab, whether that be green or red or whatever.
I have a lot of questions too, but there's a lot of typos and just small mistakes in here, and I hate to take people's time up to go through them, but I guess we really don't have any alternative.
I think if they're just simply typos, we can correct those without having to debate them. If you have some typo,
If there's nothing.
you just want to give them to me, and I'll make sure that the final document has corrected those typographical errors. If they're substantive changes, then those I think, are things we need to certainly discuss in an open setting.
By way of example, on page 13, it refers to census 2020, which can't be right. It's got to be 2010, that kind of thing. Which I think perhaps I can just get with Peter and go over those.
Yeah.
I'm not sure. Oh, I don't even see that.
Bottom of the last,
The last block.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay.
I'm fine with that as long as the commissioner is comfortable with
I'm good
just
with it.
any
Yeah.
typographical errors. And Kelly's
That's
always
fine.
really good at catching this.
Okay. Well, I had some general comments on, and then I guess what we'll do is we'll kind of go through it and then we'll open it up for the public to provide your comments as well. My comment on the introduction is, you know, we've got,
Just a second, where are you?
I'm at the very beginning, I'm on page 12, the introduction. And the introduction includes the basically projected growth, demographics. Well, anyway, we'll start there. And I know this was one of the comments that some of the, that were submitted previously, but and I don't remember if it was answered or not. But what are vacant units?
I have the same question, thank you. As compared to new occupied units.
Right. I mean, there needs to be some discussion there as far as what those are, and you know, why would you build vacant units? And
Thank you.
Sounds like a Yogi Berra comment.
It's funny because we all documented that same question.
Are you reading that, Peter? Are you?
I
Yeah.
am.
Okay. Okay, that's fine. And then related to that is that, I mean, we've got a table here, but there's really no description. You know, it's like, well, what's the significance of, you know, when you said that adding information about the purpose? I mean, why is this table important? And this comment sort of repeats itself through some of these other sections. Is that, you know, there's data there, but you know, if you're really going to be user friendly, I mean, you need to even have a sentence or two or saying why. I mean, why this table and why not another one? Why is this significant, and how does it, you know, translate to preparation of the general plan? How is it going to be used?
That's a good comment.
So, are you going to get back to us on vacant
Well,
units?
it sounds like there's going to need to be some additional work done on that section. And so I think maybe as we go through, if there's something, I'm making some notes here. Okay, well, I need to research that because, you know, frankly, I'm not sure at this point.
Okay, that's fair.
It is fair.
You know, most of this was compiled before I took it on. I've been using the information,
Right.
but you know, it's like that's something that didn't really sort of hit me as far as, oh, that's a good question. I didn't think about that.
Okay.
So,
This is part of the mint here that was just passed down that,
you know, it's
Hard to tell what
it's the whole record starting back in 2008.
The breadcrumb trail.
Up to when I picked it up last March.
Okay.
And you know, a number of people have had their hands and fingers in it. It's where we're at today. And so this sounds like this table 1 needs better explanation and certainly some definitions. And that may then help us as we move into the land use element
well, I'm good
as
with
we get into that
recommending
discussion.
that we just put page 12 off and.
So I'll work on clarifying that, and we'll add some additional language to address your issues. And so,
Right, just an explanation about why this particular table and this information is important. What
Okay.
it does to inform the general plan update.
And whether or not we even need to make a distinction between something called vacant units and occupied units, and maybe there's just projected, you know, units needed or something.
yeah.
Why would you build a unit?
I'm sort of curious of
with-
that.
with-
I'm sure there's a reason for that. I just don't know what it is.
Okay. So again, on table 2, I mean, again, just a sentence or two about what the distribution of the population, I mean, why is it important to be, you know, just a description for the reader to say we're including this because this is important because this has to do with how we project or how we plan for land use and circulation in those areas based upon, you know, projected population growth. Something that simple, but just that explains to the reader about it's not just numbers, but it attaches some significance to those numbers as far as the general plan.
That would be a statement that you would add to your introductory comment.
Yeah, it could be
That
all handled
Fawn
in, it could.
earlier reference.
Yes, it could like handle both tables.
Yes, right.
Yeah,
This is why this is important information, this is what we do with it.
that's right,
Yeah.
yes.
This is the element that it's going to apply to, which would be land use, or possibly circulation, or whichever elements. But I think maybe Fawn's also saying, in what way is the information used, not just where.
Well, and why it's important. This is what, yeah,
Yeah.
and this is what we're going to do with it.
Agreed.
Yeah. And so that whole section then has to deal with the tables as well. You know, that we've got like 2 maps here that show, you know, we've got these numbers of, you know, I don't know what 2.110 and 2.22, I mean, I don't know what those numbers relate to. I mean, why are those numbers, you know, those sections of the county, I mean, are those, I don't know, it just seems odd. We've got 2.10, 2.2, 1.2, 5 point, you know, it's like, what are those numbers? How do they relate to these geographic parts of the county? Again, it makes reference to vacant units, occupied units. And there, again, there's no information about it. You know, why are these maps important? What are they telling us? And maybe it's just a graphic depiction of what's on the table before it. I don't know.
I think
It
that's
it
what's-
is, but
Yeah.
if there was a sentence that said that.
That's right. It said, you know, here are the
Figure
numbers.
1 shows
Right.
this.
Yeah, it takes these numbers out of this table and it puts it on the map, because some people can, you know, I mean, you get, just so that you know why it's there. And that would include, you know, again, for the projected one for 2035, same thing. That whole, yeah. Any other comments on the introduction?
I didn't have a problem correlating the table to the map, because basically it says what the tract is, but I think you're right, maybe if we just added a line, something that says refer to the map on page such and such for these census tract numbers. I mean, it's a simple sentence. But I think it reads pretty clear.
Yeah.
Well,
Because
this-
honestly, I didn't even know that those were the census tract numbers until now. You just mentioned it on the table.
Oh.
I mean, it just, you know, so I
That's
can't
okay.
be the only one.
No, you're not
Yeah,
the only
I
one.
agree.
Yeah. Moving on,
Yeah.
land use.
Would it be a good idea for the public to maybe comment on the section at a time before you go into the other section?
What would you guys prefer?
There's a lot of sections in here, but whatever you want to do.
Can,
Maybe we could do it like 3 sections at a time.
You're just going to forget what you just talked about here and what we could.
It's up to you. It's up to the commissioners. How do you guys want to do this?
you want to allow open comment on every?
On each section?
Well,
Oh,
let's
yeah.
let's look ahead to see if maybe there's a logical break here. We got land use, and that goes how far? Oh, not very far. Circulation is next.
Well, actually, I got a lot of comments on those because they are so short.
Oh, well, I don't know.
Shall we let's do introduction and land use together and see how we go. Let's do that, 2 of them.
Okay.
All right. Well, I have some comments on land use. Do you guys?
Go ahead.
Okay. All right. Well, I guess I'm curious why. I understand that we're only doing the minimum as far as what the state requirements are, and the state requirements, to my understanding, as written here, only include a discussion of areas subject to flooding in the airport land use plan. But land use and circulation are probably the 2 parts of a general plan, and therefore, I think discussion of a background to the general plan, which the intent of this document is, that really sort of touch the heart of most people, and yet there's really no discussion about it at all here. I love agricultural resources. They got 44 pages, of discussion and background and data in support of that element in the general plan. And, land uses, like three, well, it's hardly anything because it's just mostly the airport. So I guess I'm wondering why there's not just a summary of kind of land uses by, general plan type, percent that were built, and, some discussion about the conditions that are on the ground today that would inform somebody, reading the background report and say, oh, I understand why they took this direction in the general plan, because in the background report it says, that they've got, this much developed land, this much land that's available for new development, this much reserve that's, the public lands, some basic discussion about what's on the ground today.
Okay, so the way that I read that was different than you, because when I read through this, it specifically states where you're going to find that other information. And I think Peter referenced it in open comments that a lot of that background information is going to be put into each element, and it talks about that in here. Please.
We'll wait for the public comment period.
But we haven't gotten to those elements yet as far as working on them and putting it in there like we've done with the other documents. I think, and that was part of, I thought, our process moving forward was we were going to make sure that we documented into each element so that it was an easier reference. But maybe I'm wrong, and that's not what we're doing.
Well, so we've got 44 pages of discussion of background on agricultural resources. Now, I imagine all of that information is used to inform the preparation of the agricultural resources, that section of the general plan. We've got one page for land use. I mean, how are we being informed by this document to prepare the land use element for the general plan? That's my question. There's nothing in here that tells me we even understand what we're talking about in land use to inform the discussion or the preparation of the land use element.
Okay,
I mean, where's the background? That's what this is, right?
maybe, I don't know that there's a page count issue here. I think maybe with agriculture, I think you've got just data. It takes more pages to include all of the data that goes into it.
But don't you think with land use, there's just data too? There's data about how many acres we have of developed land, how many acres we have of undeveloped land, how many acres we have or how many projects are permitted and how many projects are in process. And, I think there's a lot of data in land use too that's not reflected here.
Land use is going to be the largest element we have, and basically all those things you just spoke about are in that element for reference. I mean, you're wanting a specific table for land use on here? Is that what you're saying?
I would like to see some discussion that we actually have land and the uses that are on it today in this county.
Well,
that's what I'd like to see, just like we have in the agricultural resources, that we have land that's in agricultural preserve, we have land that's got mineral resources, we have land that's got...
But where do you stop with putting information in the background report?
I'm not asking for 44 pages, but I'm just asking for if somebody looked at this background report and said, oh, I get it. They're mostly agricultural county. I can see because they've got this many acres that are planned and zoned, for this use and this many for that use. And, oh, yeah, they're basically rural in nature. You'd have no idea based upon...
I could go with you suggesting a table that does break down what you're talking about, our different uses in the acreage. But I'm not sure I want to get into writing full reports on, because I believe we could go back to the elements and that information is there, and it references in this that it is going to be back into the elements, and you can say it's not in there yet, but we haven't got there and worked on it.
No, I know, but before we get to actually preparing the land use element for the general plan, which we're probably already have done, is that this is what was supposed to inform the production of that element.
You know,
I don't think that's true.
No?
I mean, I don't think that the the background report forms the basis for everything that's in various elements. I mean, it's background information, but it doesn't mean that everything is derived from the background report.
I didn't say everything was derived, but if you look at some of these other sections, such as agriculture, even the noise element, which was already, approved, you get a sense of, oh, they've got, these kinds of resources, and I mean, you get a sense of what the conditions, the sort of the baseline conditions are for that particular.
You know what I think? I think we're putting the cart before the horse here, and that the background report should be at the end. So as we're working through the elements and we're picking up and adding that information, we can adopt it into the background report. So when we're working on those elements, then we could be going through it and saying we'd like to see that in the background report at the end, instead of trying to do this up front. Because I'm sure as we go through those elements, we're going to say, wow, that really should have been in the background report. And we should be adding to the background report as we're going through each element, so we've covered it.
In a way, the background report is like a technical appendices. But it also, the guidelines and the law require, the guidelines suggested in the law requires that we look at certain information. We review certain information as we prepare the general plan. And so that information that we looked at, where it wasn't in some other document already, we compiled it here. I mean, there's been several reports to prior boards as far as where we're at today with, with acreage of, developed land. We could certainly add a table or two that, provides, some overview of, what land's available today, what the, vacancy rates are, what the current general plan provides, so that we have an understanding of where we're at today, or someone can sort of see, okay, I understand that. We've got X number of acres of high-density residential land that's vacant. That could accommodate X number of residential units. We've got so much acreage of industrial land available, that kind of information. I know that's been provided previously, and we could go back and dig up the most recent report on that and compile in a way that makes it readily accessible to anyone that wants to look at it, or we could do a run of our GIS data to find if as of this date, here's where we're at. I don't think there has not been a lot of change in the last several years. So I think the few building permits that have been issued, the few projects that have been approved, won't make a substantive difference. So we could go back and I could track down one of those prior reports that and we could use that data and build a table or two that shows that if that's something the commission desires.
Is that was that information readily available in a database? Do you have to go to, or do you have to get out your calculator and do,
You're talking about dusting off some previous.
Well, I've been looking at the previous reports, and they were sort of in different formats. I haven't found anything that's, oh, perfect, I can just pull this and slap it in the document. I'd have to sort of, adjust somewhat, try to figure out, okay, what were they presenting? How is that provided? What do these numbers truly represent? One of the problems we have with we have the data, but they're in different formats. The old general plan is not based on the same base layer, as I understand it, of the GIS system. So it's just not a simple matter of, running a computer run that shows, okay, here's where we're at. It's the acreage is calculated differently with the old general plan maps because it was developed prior to the current GIS system that we have. So it'd be a little bit more challenging to sort of do a new model run kind of thing, but
I'm not
it can be done.
A new model run, because one of the things is that, I mean, given that this information is time sensitive, it's going to change tomorrow.
Mm-hmm.
I'm suggesting that even looking back and just pulling from some of these previous, because I agree, things have not changed that significantly in the last couple of years. Mm-hmm. Enough that this is a broad enough sweep that someone can pick up and get a sense of what we're like in terms of land uses. That's what I'm looking for. So not recreating the wheel, not running new models, not trying to, make this something that's bigger than we really have time for, but using some of the existing information that we have to just give a better sense of what we look like in terms of land use in our composition.
I don't have a problem with the way it is, but I also don't have a problem with plopping in a table that has a breakdown. I don't know how many categories, but as long as the information is readily available and you don't have to spend an enormous amount of time crunching numbers. I mean, I think we should move. I wouldn't be in favor of that, but if you can look up, if you've got a database where you can throw together a table in fairly quick order, I don't have a problem with that either.
I think I agree with Commissioner Tuno. I am not convinced that that data actually is necessary when you go to the land use element and what's in there.
Yeah.
I'm not at all sure it's going to be helpful, but if it's not too much trouble to do it, and it's available, okay.
The other thing, too, that will be created as part of the EIR is sort of where we're at today. I'm drawing a blank on what the terminology is used, but it's
Where we're at today, that works.
Yeah, but it's, the first step in the EIR process is to say, well, where are we at today, and what changes would result as a result of the plan. So the EIR will have a, I can't remember, just drawing a blank on the document it's called. Anyone out there remember? Baseline, well, no, it's not a baseline report, but it's, anyway, it identifies the current situation.
So that'll
So
help.
then
This will
can-
help with that effort.
So that will have, that information will be also included in the EIR.
Right.
And then there will be an analysis of, well, what,
So
what would
it's-
the potential changes be if this plan's adopted from today's standpoint on the ground?
So instead of sending you out and making up tables and doing that, can we wait for the EIR to come out and make a point that we will adopt the page with that data on it to put into the background report?
Well, the EIR will be adopted as well, so that's going to be there available.
I understand, but her
I think
concern
that
is she
I
wants
can,
it in the
I
background
can,
report.
I can find the information that was presented to the board back in 2013. That's, as recent as we have, that did that analysis and build a table from that. It shouldn't take that much time. And add that to this. And that would be then something that the EIR consultants can use
right.
as a
You'll have done
baseline.
it for them.
Yeah.
But let's make sure, I want to make sure I understand what would be in this table. It would be land use now. This
Yes.
is what this is what the county looks like now. Not what if, and not if you adopt the land use element, this is how it could change and all that business.
No, because we don't know what it's going to be.
It's a snapshot.
It's a snapshot of today or, the most recent information we have.
If we've got that from 2013, I wouldn't be opposed to dropping it in.
Okay,
Okay.
it's the same note then. If it's database and you can crank a table out from that database in short order, fine.
Okay.
Okay. I had another comment, actually. I think that on the McCollum Hill Community Plan, it was adopted in February of 1983, and it was amended in 1988. Okay.
Correct that.
Moving on. So is there any other comments on land use?
No.
Okay, so we did promise to do 2 sections, so is there anyone in the audience that would, I'll open the public hearing to talk about introduction and land use. We've got 5 minutes per person.
Yeah, I wish there wasn't a limit, because introduction itself could have taken that much time. I'm going to go back there before I forget it.
Okay.
I won't spend 5 minutes on that, obviously, because I want to talk more about land use. But I just wanted to reiterate that we also submitted similar concerns about the introduction back in March. Exactly the same concerns. What is meant by vacant units? Why do new vacant units need to be provided? We question, please explain the reference to vacancy plus seasonal rates. What does all this mean in the tables? I submitted these comments to you, so they're in more detail in the comments that I emailed to you. If you could please look at that. That was Table 1 and Table 2. All those things were very unclear. The column 5 total units needed did not seem to take into account the existing vacant dwelling units in the county. That has gone into more detail. Again, I don't have the time to go into it now. You haven't given me enough time. Table 2, anticipated distribution of the projected population, shows future distribution that mirrors existing distribution. Why would future distribution be exactly distributed the same as it has been up to this point? We have totally different situations now, totally different water availability. We have a lot of different things different. That doesn't seem accurate to me. Again, there's a lot of comments we submitted on this already, and you haven't given me enough time to get into that. On land use, okay. A background report is what the general plan, it gathers data that the general plan is based on. So to put it after the general plan elements is written is backwards. You have to have the background information before you do the general plan. The policies are based on what you're gathering. According to the general plan guidelines, state general plan guidelines, there's a section here, Chapter 3, preparing the general plan, collect and analyze data, data collection. The general plan must be based on solid data if it is to serve as a primary source of community planning policies. You have to have the data before you have the policies. So this is an important document. The work has been done, a lot of this, by previous consultants and planning directors. We're not asking for new information here. This has previously been presented to the board. It was used in developing the general plans. We're not asking you to go out and do any more studies and maps and everything. These have been done. They were presented to the board in 2011 and 2013. There's been maps. I go into this. The maps show existing improved and unimproved lots. Those maps are there. They're ready to be used. There are approved and proposed developments. There's maps of those. Those have been done. There's listings of vacant subdivision lots. There's already listings of approved unrecorded lots, lots in pending applications. This has already been compiled and presented to the board. This needs to be here in the report so that somebody coming in to look into this county for development, for investment can just go to this report and look at it and not try to drag up what's been posted somewhere at some point. Why should we have this information just because I have it on the computer and nobody else have privy to this information because they don't have it at their fingertips? That there should be an equal playing field for investors and residents that want to come to this county. I'm just confused why you wouldn't want to include this in the background report. It's very interesting, very useful information. It's already been done. It's already been provided. It wouldn't cost you anything more, a few more hours of time to find the sources and put them together and include them. These accurate maps help you, help the government, help the planning department actually market development opportunities. They're gathering all this information in one place to show you what's there and what's not there. It helps residents and investors find the area that is most likely to provide them what they're looking for as far as what's existing. Where are the existing commercial development corridors that are already lively and growing? Your land use maps show you what's zoned for it, but they don't show you what's actually there. What we're asking is to show what's actually there on the ground now. What's the existing conditions? That's what's important. It's important for investors and also for development of the general
You've got about
plan.
a minute, Colleen.
Okay. And basically, again, going back to the general plan guidelines, collecting and analyzing data can be expensive, but this has already been done. This was done by previous general plan consultants and planning directors, so that shouldn't be an issue. Existing land uses, when preparing a general plan, planners need an accurate picture of the existing land uses in the planning area. There's a number of sources. The sources, we've got them. They're there. Use them. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else want to talk on these two sections?
Good morning, Lou Mayhew. Just a couple of comments. I've been surprised at reading both the draft general plan and the technical appendices. It just, from a common sense, review it before you put it out the door standard, it seems to me that a good bit of it got rushed, got pushed. We had an admission today that these documents were just thrown together. And certainly the first edition came across that way. This version is an improvement. I appreciate many of your comments and care in trying to insist that things make sense. It just seems to me this whole process has been one that could have been accomplished more easily if someone would proofread things, read it from the perspective of what does the people who are going to be reading this, how does it come across, what do they need? Put some quality into it. Now, it may certainly be that planning department has been pushed and hasn't had enough time to do it, or the consultant didn't want to do it, but there's all kinds of good information that could have been used. So I'm astonished by that, and just want to say we now have an opportunity to kind of get it right, to get it clear, to get it accurate, to get what's needed. But please avoid, as perhaps was being suggested, that, well, we can wait until the EIR, because that will turn up things that can then be answered. No, I think that's the way to lengthen this process. Try and get a good product out now, and the EIR will not reveal things that are then going to have to be corrected and studied. So stay out of trouble that way. Do it right. Regarding the land use, there's been confusion about the old base layer that GIS had to use and the data that it could generate as contrasted to the new one. My understanding is that there were significant deficiencies in that old base layer, and that led to delays that often were blamed on all kinds of other factors that probably was erroneous. But it took time for a new planning director to facilitate the process to develop a base layer that was useful. And I think that's been done. But I think there ought to be some footnote in this that perhaps explains that, or defines the deficiencies of the old base layer.
Of the what?
Base layer in terms of land use, and the new one, because therein, I think, lies a lot of prior confusion, and perhaps that continues. So anyway, I just be clear, do it right, and thank you.
Thank you.
Joe Kelly of the unrepresented area of District 1. I'm going to speak to one part only under land use, and it's under Government Code 65302. which was also basically stats of 1965. So it also goes back to the idea of, here we are in 2015, yet we have stuff that's been around since 1965, and a lot of it has not been incorporated in this county. And I'm going to be talking about in 65302, the land use element shall identify. What does shall mean? Is that mandatory? So, you know, we have to know, because it's not, it is identified in a lot of other places. It's mandatory or not mandatory. Could or could not. And annually review those areas covered by the plan that are subject to flooding identified by floodplain mapping prepared by the Federal Emergency Management Agency, FEMA, or the Department of Water Resources. The land use element shall, never mind that part. My question is this: who is responsible for review, and how does it get reviewed? We've not seen an annual review, and we've had a subject go on for quite a long time, which also goes to the issue of housing elements, and we had a housing element after January 1st, 2009, which was in 2010, which triggers reviews of certain things in the conservation element and the safety element. Nothing's ever been done in this county with it. We need to have something in this general plan that causes triggering of the government to do their job, 100%. My other points, the conservation element. That portion of the conservation element, including water, shall be developed in coordination with any county-wide water agency and with all district city agencies, including flood management. Well, I don't know that we have flood management in this county. To tell you the truth, we have a floodplain management ordinance. We don't have flood management. We have a director who's flood manager, but we have no flood management. I can attest to that severely for the last 10 years. That portion of the conservation element, including water, shall be developed coordination. I'm sorry, I went back through that. Preservation and control of the pollution of streams and other waters. We don't have anything going on in that. Nobody wants to even come out and look at it. Regulation of the use of land and stream channels and other areas required for the accomplishment of conservation plan. Well, wow, in stream channels. Well, what we have is an unpermitted, unregulated obstruction of water with a diversion of water that's a violation also of another state code, 1602, of fish and game code. Nobody's doing anything about it. County's not doing anything. They run around with their tail tucked between their legs. They run away. I've stopped the state's Water Resource Control Board, and I now have Fish and Game on it. My next stop is federal EPA. That's going to be fun if it comes into this county, because it's really going to give a punch in the eye to the county by the federal government for not doing its job. Prevention, control, and correction of erosions of soil, beaches, and shores. There you go again. Protection of watersheds. There you go again. Upon the next revision of the housing element on or after January 1st, 2009, the conservation element shall identify rivers, creeks, streams, flood corridors, riparian habitats, and land that may accommodate floodwater for purposes of groundwater recharge and storm water management.
Mr. Kelly, you've got about a minute.
That is 5 minutes? I didn't even get through half.
You have one more.
You have 1 more minute.
Oh, thank you. A safety element for the protection of the community discusses also the geological hazards known to the legislative body to include flooding. Safety element, yeah, that's the same thing. I'll do the following. Flood hazard, identify information, flood hazards, including but not limited to the following. Flood hazard zone, National Flood Insurance Program maps published by FEMA, and historical data on flooding, including locally prepared maps of areas that are subject to flooding, areas that are vulnerable to flooding and wildfire. I would add to that perhaps the county needs to update its aerial map positions, that it only has 2, especially for my area, but there are others out there from private USGS maps and USDA maps that go all the way up to current almost. No, 2010, I think. Establish a comprehensive goals, policies, and objectives based on the information identified pursuant to subparagraph A. What I would suggest you folks do is incorporate strongly the concept of 65302 into this land use, so that people will have an ability to go and know where to look at things.
Thank you, Mr. Kelly.
Thank you.
My name is Keith Talia. I'd just like to throw out an issue as food for thought. You've pretty much decided on making a footprint of the county as of now. Are you talking about before the fire or after the fire? Because the fire has changed the footprint of the county a lot and what we're going to see in the future. I've had people who lost homes already tell me that they're leaving the area. Their home is not going to be rebuilt. So I think that's something you've got to consider.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Anyone else? All right, well, thank you very much for your input. Any questions? Commissioner, should we move it on?
Oh, did we want to come up with some kind of a consensus statement on what we're doing with the couple of things that we've already addressed here, and then did we move on?
I think we did,
Was the direction clear
didn't
enough
we?
to?
Yeah, I think the direction is pretty clear. There's obviously more information we need to provide with regard to the introduction, explain those terms, describe how that was used as far as the land use element, a snapshot of today on the ground, and we will bring that back.
Well, to what extent does Mr. Talia's point give you some difficulty here? Because there's a lot of places did get burned up.
But we are looking at general plan and zoning designations, right? So.
Well, obviously the fire, has had and will have for a long time an effect on growth patterns in the county. Obviously there's issues related in the safety element and public services facilities element that will, that fire will form our opinions and goals and policies that, we might have had a different thought on that 3 weeks ago. I have also heard that, there are people that do not intend to come back. They lost their homes, they were done with Foothills, they're moving to the Bay Area. That development of that land up there is probably going to be much less desirable for a number of years until it starts recovering. So it could have an effect on growth patterns in the county. I don't know that. I don't have a crystal ball, obviously. But I think it's something we need to consider as we go through this process.
It's pretty speculative, though, doesn't it?
There's a lot of
and that's really the future, not really like what we're talking about, sort of what's, exists.
Yeah, it doesn't change the fact that that parcel of land
It's still
is a
general plan,
residential 5-acre or whatever.
So when we went through the, some of the background information on the safety element, we talked about historical fires. Well, now we have a new historical fire.
You are going to have to update that one. And it's the biggest fire.
It's the most significant event to hit Calaveras County
ever.
Is, in our...
In recorded history.
Yeah, at least, recent history at least.
Yeah.
So, and I think we're all still trying to figure out what its effect is and how it will be in the future.
Well, I can tell you you're right, because I sat with many of those people for the last 4 days and heard them say, I'm done. We're going home to our children in the Bay Area and we're not rebuilding, over and over. So there is going to be a footprint change.
As far as the fires goes, it's the safest place to be right now. There's not going to be a fire like that in that area for another 50 years or 100 years. And if we manage property right, we might not, we mitigate our chances of that happening. But that falls down deaf ears for the people that have been hit.
The insurance was the issue because they couldn't maintain insurance out there.
That's probably another factor.
All right, well, I think we should move on.
Well, we can't deal with it now.
No. All right, so circulation. Comments?
Let's see. I don't have anything on circulation.
On page 25, there's a word that I really don't have any idea what it means. In the bottom paragraph, second sentence, the following exhibits show You plan modeled housing distribution for 2050 based on the 1996 general plan by raster,
That's a
R-A-S-T-E-R,
measurement, yeah.
housing and so forth. What is a raster?
That is a mapping, I had to ask the same question when I first heard it. And I hope I can explain it. When modeling is done, they will show a geographic area that says, okay, in this, it's a dot on the map that shows population for that region, but it's not site-specific. It looks like it's site-specific, but it's not site-specific. So that map, figure 5 circulation, it shows little dots, little squares, and it's hard to see on such a small scale map, but as you know, when you can look at it full size.
So Peter, it's a rectangular pattern of parallel scanning lines followed by the electron beam on a television screen or computer monitor. It's like, there you go.
So it's a, and it sounds like something we need to define
yes.
in there so that people know what that is. And how it applies, I mean, it's a technical computer modeling term, and I am not a technical computer modeling kind of guy. And so, as I understood it, it was these dots, which represent a computer modeling program, say, okay, in that area, in that region, there's going to be X number of residents, but it's not that site. It's just that represents a unit of measure, a unit of population growth that will be in that area. And so if you look at, this area down around by Milton, and you see a couple of spots down there, that doesn't mean that population is going to go in that location. That's the type of distribution that you're going to see, the pattern of distribution, very dispersed, where areas, Copperopolis, Valley Springs, there are, different color represents, a higher density, and they are more concentrated. It's just it's a physical representation of population growth for a region. But obviously that's something that needs to be clarified.
I don't think most people in the public would know what a raster is.
No, even the definition, it's like I want to look up the definition of raster again, just to, it's very technical.
Well, I think it's, I know what raster means in a different application in television production, and I'm assuming that it means kind of the same thing in computer mapping modeling, where you take a slice of a map, and it looks like what happens is that if there's an industrial use on that, in that slice, it appears in a color-coded fashion on the map. Am I right? And then you can kind of see the dimensions of the raster by looking at the blocks. Is that right?
Yeah.
Right. And it's a very kind of a low-res look at the county, and just, as you said, distribution of types of land use.
Right.
That's all it's for.
So in traffic modeling, they have traffic sheds and different zones, different geographic zones. And then the modeling will say, okay, based on the growth projections and the traffic patterns that the model creates, will show if you have a certain amount of growth in this area, it will then impact the roads. So you've got a geographic region, we expect maybe 25 homes to be built over the next 20 years in that region. They're going to, the traffic pattern from that geographic region will go 20% this way, 80% that way, or whatever the distribution is. But the first step in that is figuring out an informed estimate of where we think the population is going to go. And it's driven by a number of factors, and the U-Plan model, and there was a description of that was provided previously that shows how the various factors of what they call attractants and detractors, I think, that more people are likely to live in this area because there's water, because it's relatively gentle slopes, it's easily accessed to good roads, all the various things that make people more likely to move in that area, as well as the land use designation for that. If we have an area that's got all the services and the qualities that people want to develop, yet we've designated it as agricultural, obviously that's going to be a constraining factor on that. So looking at all those factors and the growth projections that we have, this U-Plan model distributed that based on these various factors. From that, the traffic modeling will be done. Now, there was some rough modeling done previously, and that was included in this section. But a much more detailed modeling of that will be, actually, it's included in the circulation element itself. So, there's 3 circulation maps in the element that show current levels of service, future levels of service without improvements, and then where improvements would be necessary to meet the county standards. I lost my train of thought. So these maps are trying to sort of show how we got to that point in the circulation element. The EIR will have a much more detailed analysis, but we want to get to a point before we run the traffic modeling, which is a very time-consuming, expensive process, that we have a better idea of what our land use pattern is going to be before we run that model again. It's about $10,000 a model run. At least it was 10 years ago last time I did this.
If you look at page 28, figure 5, does that map depict the conditions the way they are now, or is that some projection?
That's the projection based on the draft land use map.
As of projected out to what date?
2035.
So it's alternative 1 final allocation raster? I mean, is there an alternative 2, or this is the same page?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Kelly's on.
I'm sorry, this was that's alternative 1.
And again, my point, it would be helpful to know just a brief sentence what we're looking at here on these maps and what the significance is. So we wouldn't have to be guessing about what they are. And
yes.
It doesn't have a date on it.
Well, and it doesn't tell you what we're looking at either. Even, I think, what the explanation that you just gave, Peter, that this is a traffic modeling so far, there's attractors, detractors, and from that we'll do our modeling. I mean, just what you've just said would be so helpful in here.
Well, when I look at this map, it looks to me like it has to do with land use.
It is.
Why wouldn't this be helpful in the land use section then? And we're talking about including data, a table with existing uses of land, and this map sort of looks like that's what this is.
Well, I guess this gets to the interconnectedness between all the various elements. So the circulation element is connected to land use. This was the basis for the circulation maps that were included in the circulation element.
But this is also what you said this is a projection to 2035, not.
I don't see that.
I believe so at this point in time. I have to go back and double check that.
Okay.
Addressing Mr. Wooster's question, it relates to land, correct me if I'm wrong, it relates to land use, but only in the way that circulation is interested in land use.
Well, because of the demand on the highway systems.
Yeah, it was
Yeah,
it was
the
a
road system.
basis.
Snapshot that speaks to the circulation of people or dynamics, as opposed to specifically the land use issues.
Well, it was used for circulation. I mean, the same distribution would apply to any other, population distribution issue, but specifically it was created for the purpose of the circulation element.
So I have a question, because it says in here the requirement of this section, it requires us to look at the general location and extent of existing and proposed major thoroughfares. Where is the discussion of the existing? Was there a map here? Or where is that discussed?
Well, it's not really discussed.
Where is it addressed in here?
It's addressed actually in the element itself. So again, this is the technical background information, but there's again, I don't want to repeat what's in, what's in the element that talks about existing road system. And if there's some improvements we need to that would help. But it makes more sense to, if there is, I'm not sure what I'm saying here. The circulation element is looking at the existing road system, existing circulation system, and what we need to provide in order to accommodate the growth that we expect to have and where we expect to have it. That discussion is in the element itself, and so it's not included here.
So that's kind of where I was going with this earlier, is we're going through the elements, Peter, and we're coming across and identifying those things. And then you've got her question, can we just put maybe into the background report and reference those informations that are not in the background but in the elements, at least put a reference point into the background report so people can see it? I mean, because we've taken it from the background report and it's in the elements. But the loss that everyone that I'm hearing them say is it's not in the background report anymore, but it is in the elements. If we had a reference to the page number on the element they could go to, then it really is still in here, but we don't have to duplicate everything everywhere. Because by adding it here, having it there, we're doing so much duplication.
Well, that's what I'm trying to avoid, is the
Right.
duplication.
But if they had a reference here to it, I think that's what they're looking for is...
Wouldn't the references go the other way? You're in the element.
I don't care which way you go.
Well, you're in the element, you're reading the element, and there's some, reference to some data, then it would point backwards, not the other way around.
But going with what Colleen says, if people go to the background report first to get understand our county, what directions it's going, and they're reading the background report and they decide they want to look at investment here, then they would be able to reference that position in the element.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think
In my mind, the purpose of the background report is to help us develop the general plan. Once a general plan is adopted, the background report really becomes somewhat just history.
That's right.
It's there, but data will change over time, but it's to assist you and the board and staff and the consultants in saying, okay, well, given this situation, in the direction we want to go, what policies do we need to put into place? What kind of land use pattern do we want to create, given these facts that we know on the ground?
when you look at...
And there are, we've got numerous reports that have been previously created, from prior consultants, a number of reports that staff, provided to the board, and this document, as well as the future document, the EIR, that will all help guide us in creating our general plan. I would be very surprised if this document would be referred to by anyone in the future looking at investing in the county. They're not going to look at what was history. That it's just not what people do.
They look at the element of interest
Yeah, what are the policies, what are the rules and regulations in place, what's the land use designation in the zoning, and does it make sense for me? You know, they're going to do their own market research to say whether, you know, McCollum Hill or Valley Springs is the growing community we want to invest there, or, you know, whichever community you choose. You know, what was happening in 2015 could change. So I don't want to make this document more than it needs to be, but it certainly, you know, this is something that if we feel like, oh, you know, I don't understand why we've designated these areas as, you know, resource production. Oh, it's because there's some mineral resources here that you know, are provided. That's really what this is about.
Well, my point, Peter, too, is that it says it's, you know, it's a requirement, and it says that it's found in the circulation section of the background report, and it's not there. So, I mean, how do we reconcile that? I mean, I don't think we should move forward with the document that doesn't support itself. So, I mean, some way I think we need to address.
Are you looking at a section of the draft element?
I'm looking at page 25. So it says, you know what, it says that government code requires us in the preparation of the general plan circulation element to include general location and extent of existing and proposed major thoroughfares. And if you look to the next in the table, where is it found in the background report? It's found in this section. And my point is, it's not in this section. So we either need to say it's not found in this section and it's found someplace else, or that somewhere we need to include a discussion about existing roads in this section.
Or a map that isn't there now?
Something. I mean, we're saying it's in here, but it's not.
Well, then don't say it's in here. Where
Something.
it says where found a background report, say see circulation element.
And yet that is tiny bit crazy making, because the element is supposed to be built upon the data that's provided in the background report.
I don't know that it matters where it's at as long as it's someplace.
Well, but if it can be, that doesn't mean that the back circulation section of the background report needs to include all the road maps that are going to be in the circulation element.
It says major thoroughfares and transportation routes correlated with the land use element.
Is there a map in our database that
There
shows
is.
the major thoroughfares in the county?
There is.
Okay. Can we stick it in
We
there?
can stick it in there.
Boom, done.
Okay, so a couple of other comments I have. U-Plan, the acronym is listed before it's described. There's what U-Plan is. So I think, and that is in that first paragraph that was added about the location and extent, blah, 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 it says U-Plan. Down below, I think it's defined what U-Plan is. So, you know, it should be identified at its first citation of what U-Plan is.
Well, U-Plan isn't actually an acronym.
Well, it does say it's, doesn't it call it, isn't it stand for something? Oh, it's just a partnership and integrated planning
Yeah.
grant. Okay. And that's just it, that is its name.
Yeah.
Okay. In that same paragraph, it says that the Council of Governments is developing this model. Is it already developed?
Yes.
So we might just say, you know, develop this model. And it talks about, down towards the end, it's a free resource for county/city. Is that City of Angels? And are we just supposed to know that?
Well, it's
Or-
Tri-County, so you're looking at, you've got Jackson, you've got different cities in that Tri-County.
So I don't know, is it, and do we even need to mention that, is there a city or multiple cities, or since this is just for,
I
we're
think it's
using it
just
for
a-
our use, just take city out?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Then on Figure 4, page 27, you plan future allocations. Why is the year 2050 on that?
Because the COG has to project further. So they're on a 35-year planning horizon.
So
this was modeled for that.
So are we in all our transportation models be going to 2050?
Typically, the transportation models do go out further because of state financing, federal financing requirements. They're looking at a longer horizon. I think it's crazy personally because, you know, who knows what's going to happen 35 years from now. We'd be lucky to get it right 5 years from now. But that's what the state does, and that's what the COGs are required to do their modeling on their planning models. So that's why it's 2050.
Okay. So again,
But I think at that level of projection, it's really all pretty much the same.
Mm-hmm.
And certainly, it's if it's a 1.2% growth over time, it means more, but it still gives us the basic picture of what we're looking at.
Okay. So I think that's all I had, but just the sort of the existing circulation, and then a description, just a short paragraph, basically what you talked about discussing with us, the traffic model, the explanation, attractors, detractors, blah, blah, blah. I didn't have any other comments.
Just have one here. Isn't this map 5, the map referenced in the page 25 at the top, where found circulation? Isn't that the map we're talking about?
Map.
Item 1, general location and extent of of existing and proposed major thoroughfares, yada, yada, where found in the background report, circulation. Isn't that the map?
Well, again, this is primarily the growth allocation, so it's part of that description because it talks about major thoroughfares correlated with the land use element of the plan. So this is sort of the land use component of that. This is what the projected growth is out to 2050. So
Even better than this is the pen, right?
So this, but I think that's something that shows the existing and any proposed circulation routes and what their current level of service is something that could be, we have that information that could be provided easily enough.
Readily available.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, so any other comments on circulation? Moving on. All right, so resource production.
No. Housing?
Housing.
Well, the housing element
We've already
had a
approved
whole
it.
section of background information in that's much more detailed,
Resource
required by
production.
state law.
Yeah.
So resource production would be the
Can
next
you,
one.
can you check with the audience to see if they have a lot of questions on circulation, because it seemed kind of harsh
Okay.
limiting their...
I'm polling the audience. Is there a lot of questions on circulation? Or should we move on to resource production? Can we combine the two?
Well, it's fresher circulation is kind of different.
What was her comments going to be on?
Commissioner Lisa
I was
said,
just concerned that there was a,
Should
grouping
we-
two of them together was not allowing them time to finishing their comments, and I wanted to make sure if there was a lot of discussion on that, or could we combine it? I was trying to give them an opportunity.
you want to do circulation?
I think given the small number of people in the audience, that we
Right.
could probably
Sure.
have a little more back and forth discussion on each element separately.
Come on
Speaking of
up.
opportunities, can we have one after the
Yes,
public comment?
before we get to resource. Yes, absolutely. Colleen, would you like to?
It's also just that these subjects are so different. It seems when you mix
Sure.
up the two different chapters, you're going to mix your topics up. So thank you very much,
Don't burn
Lisa.
your clock, Colleen.
That's right.
I know,
It's moving.
It's not very long. I think it's appropriate to have the comments on the element
Right.
as you're talking about it. I basically just want to reiterate what I've said before, is that we're looking for existing conditions in the circulation background information. And the U-Plan models represent distribution for the future. So you know, the U-Plan models are not looking at existing conditions of the roads. Okay, the existing conditions are not represented in the U-Plan models. They represent the future distribution of roadways and population. So what is in the background chapter of circulation should show existing conditions of the roads. That's not there, those U-Plan
Existing
projections.
conditions, like they're in good shape
Existing
or not?
conditions on the ground, conditions.
Okay, I don't know what you mean by conditions. You mean-
Level of service, conditions of the roads, are the roads falling apart? What's the
Oh.
traffic on the roads? What's the, you know, how well do our roads work now? In other words, not in the future. The background information is what they call baseline information. It establishes a baseline of what is existing right now. That is what the background information is supposed to be. And if it's in the circulation element, that may be fine, but like you say, it should be referenced here that then this is where you find the existing conditions, baseline information, whatever term you're comfortable with. But this is where we look for what the existing roadway levels of service are, not what's projected to be in the future, but we need to establish what our baseline is right now. What is our existing traffic? Do we have 11,000 people using this stretch of driveway? We have those, and that information is out there. Like Peter said, we have level of service, we have traffic studies, we know that information, and it seems like it should be here as the baseline information. I'm sorry, do you have a question?
I didn't mean to interrupt you, I apologize.
So those are just things that we think should be in the baseline existing conditions on the ground, either in this chapter in the background report or in the circulation element. So not just projected how things are going to go, but what are we basing all of these policies and direction of growth and projections on? What is the basis of all this? So I think I already mentioned the roadway levels of service, the amount of traffic on the roads. Those are two different things. The actual conditions of our roads and bridges, there are studies that have been done, they're rated, they're in charts, they're rated in Public Works. And then how the existing population densities are located in relation to these roadways. So that affects where our population grows as related to the roadways. So all of this comes into effect. So I'm sorry, maybe beating a dead horse here, but it just seems logical to me that in the background and baseline information, you should have existing conditions on the ground represented.
Okay,
Thank you.
but I'm sorry, can I ask you just one
Sure.
question?
Sure.
Because I think I'm missing something here. I'm reading what the requirement is, and I've read what the Upland Transportation says. Where do you see conditions? And where do you see that it requires a condition report?
I didn't say that it was required. I
thought
said
that's
a
what you were saying.
background.
I thought you said we're missing a requirement.
No, I didn't say that.
Okay, okay.
No, I just said that a background report, which is also called baseline information, the previous consultant called that's what that represents, is existing conditions on the ground. And Peter, you can confirm that or deny that or whatever, but that's my interpretation of background report. Baseline information is supposed to represent the existing conditions on the ground.
Because I would have, maybe someone's going to have to explain that to me, because when I read what the requirement is, I don't see where it talks about the conditions on the ground as much as it does facilities, public utilities, as the mapping direction. I'm not saying you're not wrong and conditions is valuable information. I'm just saying I don't see where it describes it.
So there was a baseline report that was done that has a lot of that information already. And again, I was trying not to duplicate that information. You know, that information there is a public document. It was presented to the county. The board, reviewed it. And maybe the thing to do is get copies of that baseline report so that you have it. You are all new. We're all, that was prepared before any of our time here. Well, maybe Ted was around when it came out.
I think I was here then too.
Ms. Platt is referencing information that she thinks that
But
would
if-
be, pardon?
Go ahead. I was just saying, if there's information that's not in that report that would be helpful to the decision-making process that we should include there, we could certainly do that.
I wouldn't be opposed to that because I do think that's good information.
But here's, okay, let me see if I can give you an alternative to that. if a person is interested in the condition of particular roadways, would they go to the background report, or would they go to Public Works and look at the information there?
Obviously, going to the Public Works would have the most current information.
Right.
Although, I think the point is that how easy is it to get that from Public Works? Do they have a document that's sort of out there published that they can say, look at and say, here's
But it would
is.
be more
Yeah.
complete than anything you could
Well, it would be.
Okay.
And the issue is, as we prepare our plan, have we considered the information that we have available and that the public can see as it relates to circulation or any of these issues?
Okay, that's what I was getting at.
And so the challenge for us, what we are charged to do here is to try to provide that information so we, deliberate in the open, the public knows what we're considering as we prepare our plan, and that you have the information available to make an informed decision.
Okay, so that's where I'm going. So if there's information that would be valuable, information that is considered or has been considered in the circulation element that isn't in the background report circulation section in detail, which I don't think it should be, but to the extent that a report or a condition report from Public Works, let's say, was considered, it was considered in the writing of the circulation element, and maybe other reports. Maybe there's a little section that you can just say the following reports were also considered in drafting the circulation element. Here they are. Here's where you find them, and not stick them in here. Not put all that data in the background report and bloat it up and duplicate the effort.
And that's what I've tried to do. And if we haven't been successful in identifying where that information is available, then we need to improve that.
Okay, I guess my only question is then, would there be, or have I missed that there's a section sometimes where you say referenced also the following reports and where you find them in the county if you're interested?
Yes, and that...
They have a link here for it.
Well, are you looking at page 25?
There is a separate bibliography, but maybe the better way to do that would be to identify,
The bibliography section by section.
Right. Or specifically where,
The introduction.
in the introduction there where it says, here's the things that we're required to look at. Here are the things that we, maybe not even be required to look at, but we looked at anyway because it was good information for us to consider.
Right.
And again, we've been doing this now for 7 years. And so there's been a lot of information that's been considered over that time period. The background report is not a compendium of every piece of information that we've looked at.
Right.
But it's sort of a collection of some of those sort of loose end kind of pieces that weren't in some other published document. But I think that given the amount of time and given the changeover in individuals involved in adoption, that having some assemblage of here are the critical documents that have been prepared over the period of the general plan update process, that there's a easier reference to that information may be helpful.
Say that this report has relied on the information, the data contained in those documents. And
Yeah, everything has been building upon itself over time.
I think that would be very
Yeah.
helpful. There's a discussion about that in the introduction.
So there was a baseline report. There's a lot of good information in there. It's a little bit dated, but it was, just before or it's the beginning of the economic collapse, so not a lot has changed since that time. If it had been continued on the growth that we had prior to that, we probably would need to update that more. But there's been very little change in the county, since 2008, as far as population growth and demand. I think, again, as we said, the biggest change has been the fire. And we didn't have that, information until just, last week. So
Sorry for interrupting you.
You mentioned the bibliography, which is not in the background report.
it's attached to the general plan itself.
But it's
But
not here. It's not
it's not-
discussed here.
it's
And
not
And I
discussed,
think it
yeah.
would be helpful for
So,
it.
so referencing other information either in like the introductory section of each section of this would be helpful to say, okay, I'm not going to recreate it here, I'm not going to reproduce it here, but here's also information that provides us that information that we looked at in the preparation of the plan, and we can go back to.
Okay, so that's another little piece that you're going to stick into the introduction?
Mm-hmm.
If we were agreeing on that?
Yes,
I'm agreeing on that.
I think it's great.
Okay.
And-
I think that
And Colleen, were you done?
I
That's the clean
just
one.
wanted to basically piggyback on that and go back to exactly what I was saying, and this is what I sent you in comments on September 8th, that if prior documents are available and have been used as background for the general plan, they should be either directly included in the background report or described, listed by name, and referenced in the background report, in the introduction, in the bibliography, so we know what this is all based on.
Okay.
You know, it's fine that you used all this stuff, but if it's not referenced,
Right.
that's not obvious, and nobody can go look it up if they don't know what
Right.
was used. So, yes, please, you know, if you're using something in the circulation chapter, basing it on existing level of service and this and that was based on something, let us know what you based it on. So
Okay,
that's-
thank
okay,
you.
Thank you.
Joyce Teckle, continuing forward on that, the regional transportation plan, it's real important that the most current one, 2012, is referenced and used, because that's the most recent explanation of the existing situation in this county. And financially, as far as roads are concerned, it's pathetic. If we ignore that or don't reference it, that information isn't readily available to people. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? All right, I think we're going to take a short break. 7 minutes, is that good? Or do you want the 7 minutes? All right, so we'll come back at 10 after. Yeah, 10 after. We're reconvening, Mr. Talia. So I think was there any other further discussion on circulation? Are we moving on to resource production, I think, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Can I bring something up completely off topic real quick? We've been working a lot with the housing problem that we're having right now with the fire, and I'm being asked at 12:30 to be in a pre-meeting and then 1:30 a conference call for FEMA. And I'm wondering if we can maybe adjust our lunch schedule so that I can accommodate doing that.
So what is it you're asking for? You want to?
I'm asking if we can we can have lunch at 12:30, and then I have a conference call with FEMA at 1:30 in Cal OES that I need to participate in. So
lunch would be 1:30 to,
No,
12:30 to 1:30.
Or 1:45?
I mean, if I can be dismissed for 30 minutes of this process and you guys can carry on,
Well, why
that
don't
would
we
be okay.
We'll do lunch 12:30 to 1:30, and then you just join us when you can.
Okay, perfect.
Okay, that's the plan. All right, so resource production, comments?
I'll lead off with a comment on page 33, second paragraph, second bullet point. Field crops and rangeland are combined. Third line down, and field crops, parentheses, led by rangeland. I'm concerned that those two categories are somehow combined when they're very different uses.
What page are you on? I'm sorry.
33?
The second bullet point down from the top
Oh,
on
okay, I
page
got you.
33.
Yes, okay.
At least in terms of water usage, there's a big difference there.
This is data that we get from the annual crop reports, and that's how they've compiled that information.
Well, we got a rangeland guy here, expert in that, and I just don't understand those two categories of ag being combined. It doesn't strike me as being a logical combination.
Well, I didn't understand it either, because I don't view rangeland as being part of field crops. And it seems to me, and this problem's going to come up in succeeding pages, rangeland creates wealth by livestock, not otherwise. And so you have livestock and poultry being the first category, and then later on you have field crops led by rangeland. Field crops, paren, led by rangeland, in paren, and it does not make sense. I just don't know what that means.
I can talk to the Ag Department and see if they can break that out. These are, again, historic crop reports that the county Ag Department prepares annually, and for whatever reason, that's how they've categorized that. We didn't go out and do separate analysis. This was just, historical documents that we've utilized to identify what some of the resources are.
If it were to be broken out, if Ag comes back to you and says, okay, here's a breakout for you, where would it apply? That would change, where else would it apply? Well, here we go.
Well, you can see
Table 9.
Exactly.
So here's Table 9, which shows field crops to be hay, pasture, and rangeland again. So it would affect that. So it looks like the only field crops that we have in the county, at least by this table, is hay production, and I'm going to assume that means alfalfa also, but I don't even know that we have any alfalfa in this county, do we?
$35,000 worth. 2012.
Well, we don't, that's the miscellaneous category of legume hay, native hay, et cetera. It's 35,000. We don't know if that's, we don't know if there's even an acre of alfalfa. Not that it's a big deal, but in general, hay production is our only field crop.
Well, we have cultivation.
Well, it's essentially the same issue, Peter, on Table 9, just what is rangeland here, because it's not apparent to some of us.
So we could, the report is what it is. That's the way it was reported to us, or reported to the county, to the Board of Supervisors and the public. We could add a discussion, somewhere in, expand that paragraph to describe what is rangeland and how that value is calculated, if that's something that's important.
Well, yes, to make sure it's not duplicative of livestock, for one thing.
That would suggest that on Table 9, rangeland is simply broken out. And that on that bullet point that I mentioned on page 33, that it'd be broken out there too, that you've got field crops and then separately rangeland.
Okay, on page 33 as well, this is a question under trends B. It starts stable production / lower moderate increased production value. Underneath there, it has irrigated pasture, and it puts a dollar value on it, $240,000 to $260,000 annually. And what I'm not understanding is that, are those values, where are those values coming from? Because irrigated pasture typically only turns into dollar if something eats it, and then turns into meat. So it's either cattle or sheep or goats. And so how does this correlate with basically the livestock numbers? Is there a double up or a duplication here?
You're double counting the dollars if you count irrigated pasture value and then you count it again as beef production, sheep production, et cetera. So if all irrigated pasture it's not hay production, it's pasture, so somebody's going to eat it, And so these dollar amounts should actually, in parentheses, should indicate that that is beef production or livestock production.
If that's what it is, and then the question is that duplicated elsewhere when you have the numbers for livestock production?
Are they irrigated pastures, does that include things like spray fields?
I don't know. I suppose it could. It's
I would
irrigated.
suspect, but I would need to check with the ag department to make sure that that is the value of the grass, that perhaps if someone has pasture and they're leasing that land to
Grazing.
a cattle producer, that's the value of the pasturage, the grass that's grown for the cattle producer to benefit from.
So then it would not be double counted.
So it may
in that
not be
sense.
double counted. I don't know that. That's sort of, I'm just sort of speculating here because I don't know how they calculate those numbers and what it represents. So if someone who's growing grain sells that grain to the farmer, to the cattle rancher, to fatten up his cows at the end of the process, then that sale of the grain is a benefit to the grain grower. The guy that's got the irrigated pasture or the rangeland, there's a value to that. It's a cost to the cattle producer, but it's a value to the landowner. Now, if he's got his own pasture and he's got his own cows on that, I don't know how that's calculated, and I don't know
Whether
if
it's his own land or somebody else's, whether he's leasing it, it still has that value.
Perhaps.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'll find out. We can clarify that.
Okay. My last comment on page 33 is the bottom bullet point. There's a kind of a confusing reference there that where there's a showing that the rangeland acreage declined by 176,000 acres, and it goes on to say that it looks like this is due to a different method of calculating the acreage and so forth. And my question is, why do we need to say any of that? Why didn't we just say what we think the rangeland acreage has actually done, which appears to be the last sentence, and just delete the rest of that bullet point?
I found it confusing as well, and then maybe a good solution.
This was a recommended edit from the Ag Coalition because they felt it was important to note that we really haven't lost that much rangeland, that it was based on an accounting process of that, so that we don't provide misleading information that says that, gee, there's this huge loss of rangeland back in whatever year that was, and what was the reason for that? Was it a land use change where we converted large areas of rangeland to commercial or industrial or residential uses? No, but if there's a better way to clarify that.
So if we just didn't say that, if we didn't cite the county's annual crop report, that we wouldn't need the sort of the disclaimer in the middle, and then just say rangeland acreage is, has remained, this many acres plus or minus since 2008. Right?
That was my suggestion.
Okay, so
just get rid of everything except rangeland acreage is, has remained at 188,300 plus or minus acres since 2008 and increased to 198,000 in 2014.
But then, then the language has remained at is not relevant. That should be past tense. Rangeland was 188,300 acres plus or minus up until the year 2014 when it increased to 198.
Well, I don't have a problem with the sentence as written. It just says it's remained at 188,000 since 2008, and then it goes on to clarify it increased to 198 in 2014.
I guess I'm being a grammarian here.
Well, maybe Peter can just like play with the language, but the
Well-
intent is to,
Well, or you could say rangeland acreage remained at 188,300 acres from 2008 to 2013, comma, and increased to 198.
there you go,
There
perfect,
That cleans it.
yeah,
And that's the only sentence you need for that entire bullet point, is that?
Right.
Correct.
I believe is what we're saying.
Correct.
Okay.
Any other comments on resource production?
Page 37,
Okay.
the bottom part there under Williamson Act,
Yeah, I have that too.
the figures don't seem to be consistent. The sentence says, per the California Department of Conservation, there are 143,000 plus or minus acres of Williamson Act lands. And at the table down below, it only adds up to 140,939. And then the sentence says, with notices of non-renewal issued for 7,580. And underneath, the table has what appears to be a corresponding different figure of 7,534. So, I mean, the reader, I think, would,
Which number are they using?
Yeah.
well, what's right here?
Right. Okay. Others?
Yeah, on the same table, maybe I'm just not a good reader of tables. The non-renewal file. So these are acres that are going to fall out of the Williamson Act, correct?
Yes.
At the end of their contract.
Correct.
Okay, it says that represents 1% of the county?
Or 1% of
One-
the acreages in the Williamson Act?
1% of county acreage.
1% of total county acreage?
Total county.
Okay.
Not just Williamson Act, that's everybody.
Oh, I see. Total.
Okay, so
Yeah.
so 7,500 equals approximately 1% of the county. And so it sort of matches up to the 133,000 acres that represents 20% of the county.
Right.
Not exactly, these are big pluses and minuses here. Okay, fine.
Okay, then on page 39, we have the same issue, we've already covered it on that table there. You know, what is rangeland essentially? And is there a double count with cattle and calves when you're talking rangeland dollars and irrigated pasture? It's just not clear to me what the answer is. I'm sure there is one.
Okay.
I don't have anything till we get to page 44.
44?
Yeah, table 15.
Oh, but I have a 43 question. if you don't
43?
mind.
Okay.
Top paragraph, last sentence, first paragraph. A timber harvest plan, THP, is the environmental review document submitted by the landowner to CAL FIRE outlining what type timber will be harvested, how it will be harvested, and the steps that will be taken to prevent damage to the environment.
What's your question?
My question is, what is my question?
Well, you need a period after environment.
I got that.
Well, yeah, that must have
That
been
was
it. Hey,
Not even the smallest detail escapes you.
yeah, okay. Lost
We
my
can come back to it.
I didn't write it down, so I thought I would remember my question, and now I don't. Never mind. If I can't come up with it, that's my problem.
Was it a question about the reference to the environmental review document? Because the THP serves the purpose of a CEQA document for private timber harvest. They're submitted, there's mitigation measures that are included as a part of the timber harvest plan. CAL FIRE
That's probably what
reviews
the
it.
basis of my question is. I didn't know what such a document was. What was the nature of this document that the landowner files?
So the contractor that's taking the trees out in our area have to file the THPs, and they have to be specially licensed to the state of California to do tree removal. And they have to have that license in order to remove that timber from the property and sell it back to logging mills.
And why is CAL FIRE involved in that?
CAL FIRE is the formerly known as the California Department of Forestry and Fire Protection. And so it's still the Department of Forestry. The Board of Forestry is under Cal.
That explains that.
Yeah.
Thank you. That's it.
Okay, on 44, table 15, the largest classification of privately owned timberland is something called montane hardwood conifer, which appears not to be a defined term anyplace here, and is not a term that I'm familiar with. I mean, typically a hardwood is an oak or something like that, and a conifer is like a pine tree. I don't understand what a hardwood conifer is.
So the vegetation classification is something that CAL FIRE and Board of Forestry use to classify vegetation types. This is a mix of vegetation that's called montane hardwood and conifer. It's just the name of that vegetation type that includes, so that transition zone between the oak woodland and the forest. Montane meaning it's somewhat mountainous, and it's just a vegetation classification. There's veg class maps that cover the entire state that show what type of vegetation is used both in forestry and timber production as well as fire prevention, because they know how much, it could be grassland, it could be chaparral, but there's a wide range of different classifications that's used.
And I just looked it up. It does reference oaks. It's a type of forest plant community where oaks form a major component of the forest.
So if we need to identify or explain better that the footnote A under veg, where it says veg, it says that it's suitable for commercial harvest. Source is the Fire Resource Assessment Program, multi-source land cover data. It's just that's what CDF uses for classification of vegetation.
Are you suggesting the footnote to define some of these terms then? Adding footnote?
Maybe just a footnote. This is, says what the where the vegetation classification comes from.
Without duplicating all of the...
Yeah, I mean, we don't need to go through and describe each one of these
Yeah.
vegetation types. These are, this is used for a wide variety of different uses in forestry and fire protection issues.
Well, it sounds like it's kind of a catch-all category. I mean,
No.
it's
No.
included in the
It
conifers.
sounds like a transition
It's a
category.
transition category.
As
It's a
in
type of
elevation.
vegetation classification that is unique to that area. And it's not oak, it's not, not red fir. It's like the other one, the Sierra mixed conifer, which has to be the second largest, is a vegetation type. It's a mixture of cedar and fir and pine. It's not just a solid stand of red fir or it's a solid stand of ponderosa pine or something like that. It's that mixture. And so the forestry professionals know that type of land has certain quality of timber in it. And that's where the value is in knowing what kind of timber is there. If we can clarify that.
Well, as you say, maybe just a footnote that tells us where it came from.
Yeah.
It's right.
Other comments?
A second here. What page does this section end?
I think it's 86.
Yes, right. Then I don't have any more on that section.
Neither do I.
I don't either.
I don't either.
So I think we're, let me see where this one is. Oh, no, I go to open space. All right. So, anyone in the public like to talk about resource production?
I'll help you a little bit with this timber issue. It goes back to 1973.
Could you please state your name?
Dennis Mills.
Dennis, thank you.
It goes back to 1973 with California Department of Forestry. And what it is delineates is specific types of trees, such as fir, red cedar, but they have to be in excess of 8 inches to qualify. And at that point, then, they are subject to a timber harvest plan. And in some cases, there is a requirement for a forester, certified forester to be involved. And in many other cases, it is not. But there's a delineation. There's 3 types of delineations on that to determine whether or not you need to have a forester involved or whether it's simply just applying for the permit on private property. So I would go back to the 1973 document and see what it says, or I can forward a copy to you because I have it in my files. Okay?
Thank you. Anyone else? All right, well, we're moving on to conservation and open space.
What page does that start on?
87.
87.
We on 87?
We're starting on 87, yes.
Okay, it looks like we are identifying rivers, creeks, and streams twice in the table on page 87. That's just a mistake.
Oh,
How far down on the
I
table
see the
are you?
first time.
1, 2, 3, it's like
It's
4
about
down
7
and then
down
about
from it.
8 down.
Is it river streams important for the management of commercial fisheries? And then you just have river streams, lakes, banks of rivers and streams. So are those the two? Because.
No, it's just a straight
It's just a
duplication.
straight
Oh, okay,
duplication.
okay.
It's just like a typo almost.
So it's item number 6 and 12.
Yeah, they're not numbered, but yeah.
Rivers, creeks, and streams. Oh,
Where?
yeah, I see, okay.
A little bullet line.
It's just,
Oh, I was looking for the longer ones. Okay,
Okay.
all right. Did you get that,
Yeah,
Peter?
yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
those are the easy fixes.
Yes. Let's have a discussion about that.
No, let's not.
Moving on.
So one thing that's obviously missing on this is a sort of comprehensive map of the open space. We're working on that. That will be completed prior to getting into the conservation element discussion itself. Took us a while to get some of the data we were looking for.
Mm-hmm.
I've got something on 94, if nobody else has something before that point. And that is the red circle in that map there. What does that represent?
That's a good question.
Sometimes
It looks as if, in this printing, that the red circles on
I know.
several of the subsequent maps,
It's a what now?
I'm going to have to go back and look because that did represent, we had some other labels on that that said what those were, but now I'm drawing a blank.
It's a funny kind of map because it only shows part of our county. and it purports to show critical habitat. This is all about a yellow-legged frog, all right? So if I read this,
So the red circle is just for identifying the area of the critical habitat that's in the county. It's just sort of drawing our attention to that little corner of the county where in this case, the Sierra Nevada yellow-legged frog critical habitat is.
okay, so, fine.
You know, because of the scale was so, like, don't worry about all the rest of the stuff that's out of our county. That corner up there is where.
Is the only yellow-legged frog critical habitat in our county?
Right.
Yours isn't red, is it?
I didn't print in color. I printed my own documents.
So adding a short identifier, what the red circle is that what we're going to do?
I think it should have been, yeah, we need to.
Well, now that with the explanation, I get it, but
So if you turn to
There should be a
figure
footnote.
46
Can
on
we do
page
a
98, so the same thing,
footnote?
that's a
So
little
it's
corner
not-
there
for people
that
of
don't print
the
color.
Yeah.
Greens
Well, even if they do,
Victoria
it should be clarified
Yeah.
what that circle
is in the county.
it's
not
like
in the
somebody's
scale.
backyard,
Right.
that the little
That's
tiny
just-
piece.
So are we going to, was that, just to wrap this up, we are going to identify what the red circle is?
Well, we could either identify it or just eliminate it.
Yeah, you eliminate it, it's fine, because it, as long as the,
Well,
it
one
does
could,
look like the county line crosses through that tiny little tip there.
Yeah, but if that's the critical area, I think it should be identified, and we can just put a little footnote to it with the scale.
or just say that's the closest that this habitat
Yeah,
comes.
the
Because this whole
only
page is
critical
just
habitat in the county
referencing
is
the
within the
critical
red circle area.
habitat. Maybe at the top there where it references the critical habitat, we can say see circled area or something.
That, for
Yeah.
that portion within close proximity,
Yeah.
in the county, in close proximity to the habitat, something. But I agree, it's like you can't have a circle with nothing, no identifiers for it.
Heck no. Okay, if we're done with that one, then I have a 95-page
Okay.
question, which is all about figure 43. What's the source of where'd this map come from?
I'm sorry, page 90,
We're at 95, right
95.
there, that one.
Map 11, figure 43.
this is from the Federal Register.
Says it at the top.
Right. And so this is the sum total of tiger salamander critical habitat in our county?
Yes.
And it's again there's a little Unit 5 and a little tiny piece of Unit 6.
Correct.
And are there other units elsewhere? Why do and that's just on that map, we're 5 and 6, and other places might be 4 and 3 and 2 and 1?
Further up the
Okay.
foothill region,
Okay.
wherever, wherever
Okay.
else in the
Okay.
valley. that
For a
might be.
person that wants to know a particular parcel of land, does it fall within Unit 5 or Unit 6, where would they go?
We would go to our GIS layer. We have that mapped, and you can look up, parcel-specific information.
We also have a little
But
Unit
does it have
7,
an
too.
overlay of Unit 5 and Unit 6 on it?
Yeah.
And,
Oh,
and,
okay.
and Unit 7. We have a little Unit
Well,
7,
that's
too.
down in Stanislaus County.
Oh, okay, okay. Oh, I see, that's just sort of that part of the
Yeah.
quadrant.
Oh,
Okay.
yeah, where is, Unit
That's
7 is not even...
Yeah, that's not in our county,
Okay.
yeah.
Is the map you're talking about referenced here so that a person would know where to go? What was the map you talked about?
Well, it's,
GIS.
we have it mapped at a much, more specific scale, so that you can, it's a layer of our GIS system. It's not a published map necessarily. We can print it out, but, we can look at, so if someone comes to the planning department and says, they have a project, we'll look at, pull up these different layers, red-legged frog, tiger salamander, anything else we have, say, oh, you're in the middle of, we refer to this as the peanut.
And that's typically the process, right? When somebody
Yeah.
comes to you,
Yeah,
even if they didn't think to ask, you're doing that?
right.
Right. Kind of the same question on 96. So that's coming from the same source, Federal Register?
Yes.
Those are gone.
Or not?
Yes, so up on top. 12886 Federal Register, volume 75, et cetera.
I get the red-legged and the yellow-legged frogs mixed up. That's that little section over by Paloma. I know what we're talking about. On page 97, this figure 45, the steelhead. It just shows where steelhead exists in our county, right?
Yes.
And the only steelhead run is Calaveras River, correct?
That's
So
my understanding.
there's, again, there's not a source on this one. And is there anywhere where it shows the number of fish, the number of fish run, or is any number of fish makes for a steelhead run?
Apparently so. I don't know that specifically, but the Calaveras River below Hogan Dam has been identified as habitat for steelhead.
I think it would be appropriate to put a source.
By California Fish and Game? Is that how it works?
I don't know if it's state or federal. There might be, let me see.
So if the fishermen are good enough, then they catch all the steelhead, there's no more steelhead around, right? Oh, never mind. On page 98,
Got a red dot.
another red dot deal. Something, the green tuctoria, I don't even know what that is. But he's got himself a red circle in our county that equals about an acre. And that's all I have on this. Wait a minute. No.
So again, we want to identify the red circle.
Yeah.
Okay.
Let's see. This section goes all the way through page what?
One 124. This includes.
124?
Yes.
Okay. Then in that case, I have more. But I can stop and catch it. Anybody else that? Okay, I'll keep going. Air Resources, page 101.
Are we? Oh,
I'm
101, I'm sorry.
That's why I'm asking anybody else that has anything in the intervening pages?
I did. Actually, I had, no, never mind. I don't go.
Sure?
One. Yeah, I'm at 109. That's where mine is. 101, yes.
Got some kind of basic questions. The first one being, what does the state require us to include here in under Air Resources? Is that too broad a question for you, Mr. Maurer?
Well, I'm looking at the.
And let me project ahead a little bit. I don't mind telling people where I'm coming from here. In as much as our air is modified more by regions to the east of us than it is by us. I don't think that's an unfair statement. But there's no explanation of this except the one on page 102, which is the top paragraph, last sentence.
So the state requirements are listed on page 88, the last two sections of that table that started on page 87, and the state requirements. Local air quality conditions, including air quality monitoring data, emission inventories, list of significant sources, et cetera, and then the summary of programs.
I'm sorry, you're reading on page 88?
Page 88.
The state
So
requirements.
the question was, what does the state require regarding air quality?
Where on 88 are you?
The last two lines of that table, which was carried over from page 87. So the last two sections describe the air quality requirements from the general plan law.
Okay. Now,
you're absolutely right. The air quality is one of the most challenging areas of local regulation because air basins do not recognize boundaries. And we get some of the stuff that comes up from the valley. Fortunately, air is better than the valley. But we have a responsibility to address air quality to the degree that we can. And we have to recognize, and this will probably be something that comes out in the EIR, that there will be incremental effects on air quality regardless of what we do. But the degree that we can reduce and limit air quality impacts, we will try to do that. But there's so much of the air quality impacts that we are affected by are outside of our control. When the prevailing wind comes from the northeast and is blowing smoke and smog from the Bay Area and the valley up this way, particulate matter.
and I would add to that, and I believe it's Modesto, Merced Modesto. I mean, we're not too far from their airshed. I suppose we're in it in one way or another. They're listed as some of the worst air quality.
We're actually in a different air basin called the Mountain Counties Air Basin.
That's another question I have, is that we seem to have two air basin designations, correct? We have the mountain air, and then we have another one. Help me out here. What's the name of the other one?
I thought that's the only
The mountain air basin, which is not really a basin. It's the entire Sierra foothill region.
Right.
It's just we're in a sort of a category of foothill counties, but it's not a basin, an air basin. The air basin that we're affected by is called something else.
It's probably San Joaquin.
San Joaquin. I believe you're right. So I don't know that this last sentence on top of page 102, first paragraph, adequately, in my opinion, addresses the issue of our potential effect on the air that we're breathing. And I don't know. I'm not saying that our county doesn't have responsibilities, and we have to address them, but it ought to be clear that, I mean, in the extreme, just taking for the sake of argument, if everybody in this county left, emptied it out completely, how different would the air quality be in this county? Not much. If you shut down the county completely, the air quality wouldn't change.
I think what this statement is saying is that this represents the air quality in the microclimate of the San Andreas area, which could be quite different than McCallum Hill or Murphy's or Arnold or anywhere else in the county. We could, and I think it's important to note that because of the topography, it's not a single basin. There's multiple small sub-basins within the region, but we're also affected by out-of-basin air movement. And we want to add a statement or a sentence or a phrase
also
at the end
affected,
of that.
I would say mostly affected. Mm-hmm. I mean, and that even goes for the sub-basins that you're referencing. I'm not an air scientist, but I'm pretty sure I'm right about that. And that's a pretty big point. Maybe you want to stop and discuss that, Madam Chair?
I'm fine with that, adding that.
If there's any other discussion on that, I'm going to go down to table 18.
Does everyone else agree? Yeah, I think we're good with that.
Okay.
That additional description.
I'm not clear on what you mean by non-attainment, unclassified. You've got unclassified / attainment.
I'm sorry, what page are you on?
Where are you?
Table 18, page 101.
You went backwards.
Well, no, it's just these two issues cross over on pages, but I'm not through with page 101 yet because of that. Unclassified is any area that cannot be classified on the basis of available information. There's a lot of that. Just wondering why there's so many unclassified areas. Not areas, but categories of polluted.
I do not know.
Well, wouldn't it just point to the fact that there is no federal data that supports whether they can say it's attainment or non-attainment? So basically what they're saying is that they don't have the data to determine that.
Yeah, that's right. So probably because of the limited number of monitoring stations, there's not sufficient data to, and it sort of gets back to your point there previously that we have one station. It doesn't necessarily represent everywhere in the county. So when the air basin itself is identified as meeting or not meeting the classification, they can't make that determination. If that's an issue that we need more clarification on, it probably would be good to have the air pollution specialist, discuss that more, because that's not my area of expertise. One of many areas I'm not an expert on.
From there, I'm going to page 102.
Can I have something on 101? At the very bottom, there's a footnote to this table 18. It says the federal 8-hour ozone status is proposed to be changed to attainment, citing the Federal Register back in 2012. Is there anything happened to that?
I was wondering.
I'll look into that.
Because it's one of the only two where we're classified as non-attainment.
Were there still?
Well, on 102, along the same lines, there's table 19, and it shows PM10, and we didn't have any days exceeding the standard during 2009 or 2010, yet they have us as non-attainment on table 18.
Good catch.
Paragraph 101, and I'm wondering, how does that happen? Given the data in table 19, doesn't seem to be consistent.
Way to go, Kelly Wooster.
Well, I don't know. Table 18 is from 2011. Table 19 only goes to 2010. Perhaps that's...
But it says that the data was assessed in November 2011 on the footnote.
There's access.
Yeah.
And then the table before is from 2012 in the footnote. Isn't that interesting?
I will check with our air pollution control district
On these
and
numbers,
on these
okay.
numbers and
Okay.
just make sure we have it right.
Okay.
Yeah, maybe there's new information that could be added.
Okay.
If I may pick it up then,
Please go on.
I'm on page 102, the greenhouse gas section, which carries over to the top of page 104.
3. Oh, I saw it keeps going.
Just a
Yes.
tiny bit on 104.
Sure.
I would entertain the notion of chopping out that entire section for the following reason. And I know this is going to stimulate discussion, that's fine with me. I consider this to be little more than a sermon on global warming. And I'm not buying it. And I know that it came from the California Climate Change Center. I'm not impressed. I don't see what purpose it serves in our general plan.
I'm just sitting here thinking, have you read any of this?
Have I read any of it?
Because almost every item on here has just happened to us. The wildfires,
All
the
the
water
implications.
resources, the extreme in our weather
and the
changes,
Butte Fire was
the
caused
air
by global
quality.
warming?
It certainly contributed to it.
I think that our drought years have definitely contributed to that, and the rise in
And
our
we've never had any drought
temperatures.
years in California.
And it talks about the bugs attacking our trees. I
Over
don't know
the-
about you, but I'm experiencing all of this.
Over the eons that California has existed, there hasn't been droughts.
Well, I don't know, we just went through the most significant fire, at least, if you look at the list when we get down to
Look,
safety.
you're talking about a data point in a millennia
Okay.
of years.
Well, I would just disagree with you, I'll just say, and I think that we need to keep the entire section, and I think it is important to have in the general plan. It does affect land use and circulation, our natural resources, everything.
I think we want to be careful and not treading on that thing that's going on between the people who believe in global warming and climate change. They're completely different phenomena that are not related. But there are a lot of people in politics who like to use them synonymously and confuse people by changing them back and forth. But one of the first meetings I went to, I was put on the advisory committee for Department of Water Resources on the rewrite of the California Water Plan, and that subject came up early in the discussion, and I made the comment that global warming is a political term and climate change is a scientific term, and we should be careful not to confuse the two. And everybody just kind of looked around like I was speaking in a foreign language, but at the first break, about 20 people came up to me and said, gee, I wish I'd had the guts to say that. So I think they have to be careful not to get into that controversy of the difference between global warming and climate change.
So this report came out from the Climate Change Center and Climate Action Team.
Yeah, those are people that are trying to make climate change seem like global warming.
But we're paying
The only thing they have in common is the end result.
Well, this apparently is based on a report back in March of 2006. And I'm not an expert in this field, but it seems to me that's somewhat dated, and that there's should be more recent and perhaps more accurate information available here. The other thing I would say is that I am not prepared to blame the Butte Fire or any other fire on global warming or climate change or anything like it. I'll blame it on 100 years of government mismanagement of our forests and our brushlands. That's what the problem is.
You can correlate it more directly to that than you can anything else.
I'll agree with that.
When the Indians ran things, we didn't have these problems.
So, do you want to have Peter look into and see if there's an updated report from 2006 and then revisit the issue?
I would like to see that because I have read some information that suggests that much of what is said here is not exactly accurate anymore.
This is the first place I've ever read temperatures predicted to increase up to 10 and a half degrees. We're all dead at that point. Average temperatures, 10 and a half degrees increase, we're cooked. That's cataclysmic.
So we'll have, Peter will go ahead and look at additional, more recent information and data sources and come back.
Good.
Okay. Moving on. I have a 109.
I have a 109 as well. Why don't you do yours first?
Okay. It's on rural landscapes. Yeah, I don't know, it's like 5 sentences down. It refers to this report as the baseline report. So this is a technical background report. It was probably, the language was probably taken from the baseline report, but we need to make that change. Did you see that, Peter? So it says, where it says developing a precise description, blah, 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 historic preservation and other design professionals that is beyond the scope of this baseline report.
Okay. Yes, we did pull that from the baseline
Okay.
report.
And then it also describes both ranching and mining landscapes are what the Park Service, it's like what Park Service?
Well, it says in the first line, the National Park Service.
Okay, now, okay, that's where, okay, I just didn't catch it, that's good. I think that was it.
My 109 on the first paragraph, rural landscapes, relates to a comment that Commissioner Wooster made some time ago about forest landscapes, as they're called here, in the parenthetic statement. Forest landscapes are also important to Calaveras County, but are not discussed here as they fall heavily on land owned by the federal government. And yet they're discussed in conservation and open space. We're not discussing them here because they're federal government lands, and yet we discuss the heck out of them elsewhere. So I guess my feeling is that we're kind of inconsistent about how we treat federal lands within our rural landscape discussion topic. Maybe Mr. Wooster wants to chime in on that.
Well, I'm also not sure that the statement's accurate. They fall heavily on land owned by the federal government. In this county, there's quite a bit of Southern Pacific land that's forest, perhaps not as much as the government, but it's substantial. You get up in Alpine County, that's not true, but it is true here. And so I don't know where this language came from, but I'm not sure it's
the reason
right.
this was added, you can see it's all underlined, this is new text. It was added from the, from the original background report. One of the comments, or some of the comments we received, was that, well, there's nothing that describes the visual character of the county. So this was pulled from the from that background report, or the baseline report that was prepared by Mintier Harness several years ago. It doesn't need to be in here.
I think it's a good addition.
I mean, it's there, it's part of, again, the whole background information that we've been utilizing throughout this whole process to get to where we are today. And it was a attempt to provide some information. I would agree that much of the timber land in the county is privately owned and not federally owned. Calaveras is somewhat unique to the Sierra counties in that, there's not, half the counties or more is under public land ownership. We have a much smaller percentage than some of the other mountain counties.
Well, that's it.
So I can either attempt to edit that and bring it back, if you have some specific changes you'd like me to see, or like to just...
I don't know how to give you direction on specificity on that, Mr. Maurer.
I think just, a few edits of just
I'll try to revise
the forest,
that too.
Percentage of land, that kind of thing, and get rid of the baseline report, few edits, but I think it's a good addition.
Well, one more thing on these forest landscapes, and it's going to come up when we get to the general plan elements. The fact is that when you're talking forest, what changes forest is either fire or timber harvesting, one of the two. And when you're talking timber harvesting, you are talking about an area that is regulated completely by the state of California. This county has no authority or no business to regulate it one bit. And so I'm not at all sure that it's helpful to emphasize how important forest landscapes may be when the county general plan is not going to be able to deal with them.
Well, I'm struggling with that too, because they even say in here it's beyond the scope of this baseline report. If it's beyond the scope, why are we using it? It has nothing to document the background. You don't have anything you could put on here as an asterisk to say we got our information here, because there is no baseline report.
And the statement that Mr. Wooster just made is really more important, is the most important statement that you could make about these lands.
Maybe the more important thing to talk about is where the county does have,
Yeah.
I'm not sure that this paragraph really provides any information that's of value. Now that I reread it again, but where the forest landscape is that the county does have some effect on would be in places, say up in Arnold, where development is occurring. I would say that fire and logging aren't the only impacts to the forest, that urban development also can impact the forest. And so that's where we do have control and we do have some responsibility. So maybe the focus of that discussion needs to be on that. We can identify that the majority of the forested lands is either timberland owned by timber companies and used for timber production, or in national forests, managed by the federal government. But other areas, along the Highway 4 corridor and up around West Point and those areas, some of it is being used for timber production, but others is, rural residential development.
I'd be happier with that than the way
So
this is written.
I'll work on some discussion there that more accurately describes the effect of the general plan on forested lands and the importance of forested lands to the county.
Moving on.
I have nothing until 115, cultural resources.
Okay.
Well,
And
I
we have a
just had a
new
question.
cultural resources section.
I just had a question on 110.
Oh.
And the last sentence just seems to tail off, or found in the following,
Yeah,
period.
I did. That's what
I
I
did
said
that
too.
too.
I moved ahead, but mine's like following what?
Exactly. We just say following maps, because that's what they are.
Okay.
All right.
Classic rooster catch.
So we did receive a revised cultural resources.
Yeah, we did get this new one.
Okay.
And
That's the one with no page numbers.
The one with no page numbers.
well, we were given it in print, but I printed it out online from the
Email?
email.
Okay. Good.
And the first question I have is, how useful is the information in this section, particularly the prehistoric, kind of archaeological type stuff? And my basic text was, I really didn't find it very useful, kind of interesting. It was interesting reading, but not very useful. And so I couldn't understand in your report that we got last night, why did we put resources, financial resources into making it even, putting more money into it? That's where I'm coming from. It's interesting reading, but I'm just not getting how it's very useful. And then when I found out, oh, you're putting even more money into it, and I think, what? Maybe that money would be spent better elsewhere.
This was previously prepared, and it was in the draft background report that I inherited.
Yeah.
So I didn't at the time go back and modify that. We did receive a comment that said that some of this information was not accurate. There's resources missing. Amy Augustine worked with Judith Marvin and Julia to at least make it accurate. If we're going to have it in there, let's have it accurate. So that was the point of adding, making the changes. Whether it's all necessary, like you say, it's interesting information. It probably doesn't have a lot of effect on our decisions with developing the general plan, other than we acknowledge that there are a lot of cultural and historic resources in this community, and it is important in the long-term development of our communities. Do we want to, do we need to
Here's where I
base our land use decisions to some degree on the historic quality of the community?
I found it started getting useful on page 118 on the paragraph that starts with during its more than 150 years existence. Then it starts getting into, okay, here's what's in our county that kind of helped. Here's where the county really started getting taking shape, as opposed to all the prehistoric and
I think a lot of that
stuff that's long gone.
But I think it's important to the background of our general plan. You're talking about historical stuff in here. We reference a lot of historical in the general plan. I think this was well put together, and it's just background information, but it's good background information on our county.
And developed to help inform decisions on land use
And as
planning for the general plan.
as we get into developing policies related to cultural resources, archaeological resources, as well as historical resources,
This will support
that's where this information, may be useful. We can't simply ignore the fact that there has been thousands of years of occupation of this land before European settlers came here, and that those resources are important. So we need to make sure that our policies and goals address that in one way or another.
Okay. The version that we got last night with its table that starts on table 1, I find that to be useful for the purposes you just mentioned and the other folks are talking about. That's what I think is very useful historic information. My point being, your tables 1 and tables 2, the revision, if that's where the resources went into producing this kind of information, then I think that was
My understanding of this information was that it was basically provided for us. I think Judith or Julia, someone, basically wrote this up saying, here's some information that we've created, we've prepared over time, given their extensive years of experience in the county. And if you want to include this in the background report, you're more than welcome to. So we did. It wasn't a lot of staff time, writing this. This was, provided for us. So we could have had it separately and just referenced it, but it was just easy to sort of plug it in. So there wasn't a lot of effort put into it from our perspective or costs associated with the county. It was provided to us. And
in which case, I would suggest that we give some credit, not just for the purposes of giving credit, but for the purposes of telling people where the information came from. Ms. Miller is a historian. I think we have more than one historical society in the county, do we not?
Well, this was actually developed by Judith Marvin and Julia Costello.
Yes, but as part of are they connected with one of?
Well, one's an archaeologist, and that Julia's here, and she could answer any questions. So she's a professional in the field, as well as Judith Marvin is. I'm a local historian. I don't think they're not like affiliated with I think I know that Julia's on the McCollum Hill Historical Society and probably several others, but this wasn't an effort from an organization like that, I don't believe.
Oh, okay.
I think it's their volunteering because they care about the county and have the expertise.
Okay, I just wanted, maybe they pulled information from those various sources and made it sort of make sense for us, and maybe we ought to reference that, because, I'm in Rancho, so I'm familiar with the, the West County Historical Society.
The very first paragraph on page 115.
116?
115 says that the provided courtesy of Foothill Resources Limited,
right.
And that is
Judith and Julia.
That's who Foothill Resources is.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
I do have a couple questions on this. On page 119, the second full paragraph that begins, lumber has a long-standing history reaching back prior to the gold rush. Communities in the eastern portion of the county, such as Arnold, Avery, and White Pines, have been involved in the logging industry since the 1850s. I have a question whether that's correct as to at least Arnold and White Pines, because I don't think White Pines existed until, as it says later down, in the 40s or late 30s, when Blagan Lumber came in and started logging the South Fork of the McCalamy. And I don't think Arnold existed back in the 1850s or thereabouts either. I think that started with a family named Arnold that just settled there in the 1920s or 30s. But we do have an expert here who can probably tell us.
26, Mr. Mills says.
I think that reference is to the existing communities
That are there now, but
logging has a long history. We could probably wordsmith this quite a bit.
Well, the way it's worded,
yeah.
It makes it sound like Arnold's and White Pines have been around since the 1850s.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just that that's how how you describe the areas that were being logged now by the communities, but they weren't there yet. Yeah, we could certainly edit that, do some edits.
Okay.
We have a lot of information on that, too.
Okay, I'll do one typo. On page 122, about 3/4 of the way down, there's a reference to the IOOF Hall in Moke Hill. And the first sentence is incomplete. It says it's located in the corner of Main and Center Streets in McCalamy. Should be McCalamy Hill.
Okay.
Last one, page 123, O'Byrne Ferry, which is halfway down. It's not 71 miles southeast of Copper, it's 7 miles.
7?
7.
Just seems like 71.
Not since they put the new road in.
There was one other revision that was suggested since we received this, and that's on, I don't know the page number, the third page of the new edition. And that page starts with nations.
Just a second. Yes.
Okay. So the second full paragraph where it says, in Calaveras County, the old Miwok villages that are known to anthropologists were clustered along the McCollum, Calaveras, and Stanislaus River drainages. It's been proposed to strike that because it's misleading. It makes the reader think that that's the only place to find historical, or only places of historical significance are along the river drainages, but they're everywhere throughout the county. So it's been proposed to strike that.
Well, would historians say that's mostly where they were?
No, I don't think so. I think that's some of where they were, but it's not most of where they were.
In Camp Connell, they're not.
I don't know.
Drainages.
Yeah.
It just seems logical that they would locate near rivers, river
Well,
drainages.
or watersheds,
Water.
but not, yeah, watersheds.
Any water.
Yes, any water, not just
But all the other
drainages.
little creeks that flow into those
Yeah.
rivers were
Right.
also,
So,
the whole
any
watershed.
problem with striking that? Okay.
Nope.
It's the person who wrote it wants it gone.
Any other comments?
I'm done until
All right,
noise.
so we're done with open space conservation. I guess we need to take, are there very many comments on this section?
I feel like I've sat here all morning. I should get up and introduce myself. I'm Julia Costello, and I'm half of Foothill Resources. Judy Marvin is the historian in Murphy's, and we celebrated the 34th anniversary of our company, and we do cultural resources all over the state, but this is our home county, and we've always paid attention to trying to promote local resources and volunteer to write things like that. And if we're going to have a background technical report, we want it to be accurate and right on, and thank you for the careful reading, Mr. Wooster. That was great. I don't think there's anything else. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for sticking with
Thank
us. Was there anyone else? No? Okay. I guess we are going to recess for lunch. And we'll see you all back here at 1:30, at which time we will start with,
And I'll be here.
are we talking? No, are we? No. Noise, we've already, we're not, are we talking about noise?
Well, there's a separate document that was created for the noise. We don't have anything in here. There is an attachment to this.
But we don't have it with us.
Right.
There are no changes to the one that was provided in the December.
Okay.
If you want, I can.
I don't
Do
know.
we have-
Do you think we
What
need
document are
to?
you talking about?
Noise.
So there were two appendices to the background report that were provided in December. One was on noise, and I am drawing a blank on the other one. But it was a separate report that was prepared by, I think it was Brennan and Associates, that addressed noise.
But we really reviewed those when we reviewed the noise element, didn't we? Or
Well,
not?
you didn't look at, that was the background information for the noise element.
Okay.
And it was done separately, but
Okay.
we attached it, since it wasn't something that was out there normally.
Well, can we skip that for now? Because I, for one, didn't bring it.
Right, so
I
if
don't
we.
have it with me either,
Right,
so.
and I don't
Okay.
think we have it, do we?
Yes, we
Well,
have
you
it.
have it, it was provided to you in December.
Okay, I guess we'll need to have it reprovided.
So, I suppose that, we'll be bringing a lot of changes back.
We can just
If you
bring
take a look
noise.
at that, if there are issues or questions about, that's a separate document. We didn't, if there's something that we need to add, then we can add it, but that's a report that was prepared by an outside consultant that's sort of done and
okay.
provided.
Well, actually, we wouldn't be in a position to make any changes to it anyway. It's
I
not
know,
our
right, what do we
document.
know, right?
Yeah. But I
Well,
suppose
it's their
that
document.
if you look at it and you say, well, I still have questions about whatever, we need to provide additional information, or the
Well,
public says.
we could look at it.
So take a
But
look
yeah,
at
I think
it
a lot of us are,
between
our eyes
now and
might
when this
glaze
comes
over
back,
a little.
and if there's more noise or other noise information that is desired in the background report, then we can see if we can get that.
Okay. So we
I'm
will.
sorry, but when would that be on our plate?
Well, when he brings back the revisions, he'll also provide.
Because we're not taking final action today on this.
No.
There's
Revisions to
TBC.
background.
Yeah.
To the background
to
report,
this.
yeah.
Yeah, so it'll just come with that.
So then we will start with
Safety.
safety after lunch.
Safety at 1:30, 1:30 sharp. Thank you.